There is something quietly powerful about a story that begins with a man who has everything and nothing at all. Tonight, we follow a genius, brilliant, charming, and utterly alone. We watch him build walls out of iron and light, and we watch the universe, gently, relentlessly, show him what those walls were hiding him from. Not weakness, connection. Welcome to Sanctum Stories. Settle in, get comfortable, let the day fall away. You don't need to hold on to anything tonight. Just listen and let the story carry you. There is a man who lives in a house on the edge of a cliff in Malibu, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The house is glass and steel and light, a monument to a brilliant mind with nothing left to prove. His name is Tony Stark. Tonight, we are going to tell you how a man who had everything learned what it actually means to have something worth losing. Let yourself settle into this moment with us. Feel the weight of your shoulders against whatever holds you. Let your breathing slow to match the gentle rhythm of waves against distant rocks. We are going to walk with Tony Stark through the years that shaped him, through the choices that defined him, through the losses that transformed him. And you can rest here in this warm space between sleeping and waking while his story unfolds like firelight against the darkness. Picture him now, in the early hours of morning, the California sun painting everything golden. The light streams through floor-to-ceiling windows that stretch from marble floor to painted ceiling, each pane of glass precisely engineered to filter the harsh morning glare into something warm and welcoming. The ocean beyond sparkles with reflected sunlight, endless blue meeting, endless blue where water touches sky. Tony Stark moves through his mansion like he owns the world, because in many ways, he does. His footsteps echo softly on polished marble that cost more than most people earn in a year. The air carries the subtle scent of expensive coffee beans and ocean salt, blending with the faint mechanical hum of hidden machines that keep this palace of technology running smoothly. Temperature controls respond to his presence, adjusting the environment to maintain perfect comfort without his asking. This is more than a home. This is a testament to human achievement, to the power of brilliance married to unlimited resources. Every surface has been designed, every angle calculated, every detail perfected by teams of architects who understand that some clients accept only excellence. The floors are polished to mirror brightness, reflecting the morning light in patterns that shift as clouds move across the sky. Cars worth more than most people's houses sit in perfect rows in his garage. Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Aston Martins, each one a masterpiece of engineering, each one barely driven, each one purchased not from need, but from the simple pleasure of owning beautiful things. Their paint catches the overhead lighting like jewelry, reds and yellows and silvers that gleam with the deep satisfaction of perfection. Below, in the basement that serves as his sanctuary, workshop machines hum quietly in the darkness. Robotic arms wait with mechanical patience for their master's return. Computer servers process endless streams of data, monitoring stock prices and patent applications, and the 1,000 tiny details that turn brilliant ideas into profitable realities. The air down there smells of solder and metal shavings, and the ozone scent that follows electrical work. This is Tony Stark at his peak. Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist. The words follow him everywhere, a litany of success that sounds almost too grand to be real. Magazine covers bear his face alongside headlines that chronicle his latest achievement, his newest innovation, his most recent conquest, of hearts, of markets, of impossible technical challenges that yield to his relentless intellect. Yet here he stands, 37 years old, holding a cup of coffee in a mug worth more than some cars, checking stock prices on a tablet computer, so advanced it won't reach consumer markets for another 3 years. The numbers dance across the screen in green and red, responding to his company's latest announcement, his latest contract, his latest reminder to the world that Stark Industries sets the pace for everyone else to follow. Stark Industries' weapons have made him unfathomably wealthy. They have also made him unfathomably alone. You see, genius is often its own prison. When you can solve any problem, fix any machine, buy any solution, the world becomes predictably small. When conversations center on topics you mastered years ago, when challenges crumble before your intellect like sandcastles before waves, when every puzzle reveals its secrets before you finish asking the question, then what remains to capture your interest? When you inherit a company built on your father's legacy and expand it beyond his wildest dreams, success tastes hollow. When you have dated supermodels and celebrities, when you have built robots just for fun, when you have everything money can buy, what then? What hunger remains unfed when all hungers can be satisfied with a phone call and a wire transfer? The workshop calls to him this morning, as it always does. Down here, 3 levels beneath the marble and glass of his public life, surrounded by the humming servers and precise robotic arms, Tony Stark feels most like himself. Not the CEO in his $1,000 suits, not the celebrity photographed at charity galas, not the heir to Howard Stark's empire of innovation and profit. Just a man who builds things, beautiful, impossible things. The basement air tastes different than the carefully filtered atmosphere of his mansion's upper levels. Here, the scent of metal and electronics mingles with the particular smell of serious work, that combination of heated components and human concentration that accompanies true creation. The lighting runs cooler here, designed for precision rather than ambiance, casting everything in blue-white illumination that makes the smallest details visible. Robotic arms move with mechanical grace as they follow his commands, their joints pivoting with silent precision, their movements so smooth they seem almost organic. Dumb E and Yu, his oldest companions, built when he was still a teenager, determined to prove that artificial intelligence could be both functional and loyal. They follow him around the workshop like mechanical pets, occasionally bumping into furniture or each other, but always ready to assist, always patient when he grows frustrated with their limitations. His assistant, Pepper Potts, reminds him of the day ahead through the intercom. Her voice carries through speakers, hidden throughout the workshop, crystal clear and professionally warm. A demonstration in Afghanistan. The Jericho missile, his latest creation, his newest addition to the Stark Industries catalog of technological supremacy. Another weapon to add to his vast collection. Another step in his company's march toward military dominance. Another proof that when governments need superior firepower, they call Tony Stark. He barely listens to her words, focused instead on the engine he is rebuilding. A classic Ford flathead, decades old but meticulously maintained, each component cleaned and polished until it gleams like sculpture. His hands move with unconscious precision, adjusting compression ratios and timing sequences, solving mechanical puzzles that existed before computer modeling made such work seem quaint. There is peace in this work, meditation in the turning of wrenches, in the precise calibration of components, in the satisfaction of taking something broken and making it perfect. Here, surrounded by machines that respond to intelligence rather than charm, by challenges that yield to knowledge rather than influence, Tony Stark feels something approaching contentment. The intercom crackles again. Details about his flight, about security arrangements, about the dozen small concerns that accompany any billionaire's travel plans. He acknowledges with half his attention, while the other half remains focused on the delicate work of mechanical restoration, on the simple pleasure of using his hands to create, rather than his mind to calculate. This is how legends begin, not with fanfare, but with the quiet moments before everything changes. A man in his workshop, tinkering with machinery that predates his birth, unaware that in a few short hours, his entire world will collapse and rebuild itself around him. The morning light streams through the single window that connects his underground sanctuary to the world above, painting golden rectangles across workbenches covered with the tools of his trade. Coffee grows cold in its expensive cup, while Tony loses himself in the rhythm of restoration. Outside, the Pacific Ocean continues its ancient conversation with the Malibu coastline. Inside, genius applies itself to the humble task of making an old engine run like new, finding satisfaction in work that produces no profit, serves no strategic purpose, advances no grand design beyond the simple human pleasure of creation. The Merchant of Death, they call him, a title that once amused him, that he wore like a medal for achievement in the grand game of global commerce. Stark Industries' weapons keep democracies safe, dictatorships in check, the delicate balance of international power carefully calibrated in his favor. He builds the tools that shape the world, accepts payment in currencies that extend far beyond money. Soon, that title will mean something entirely different. The workshop settles into the comfortable quiet that comes with focused work. Machines hum with patient purpose. The ocean continues its endless rhythm against ancient rocks. The morning sun climbs higher, its light growing stronger as it prepares to witness the end of one life and the beginning of another. Let your breathing match the rhythm of those distant waves now. Feel the tension leaving your shoulders as you rest in this moment before everything changed. Tony Stark works in his basement workshop, surrounded by the tools of creation, unaware that transformation waits for him in the desert heat of Afghanistan, in the darkness of a cave where friendship will bloom and die and bloom again in his memory. The story is just beginning. Long before there was Iron Man, there was a boy who built circuit boards at 4 years old. Let your mind drift back now, back through decades of memory and possibility, to a time when wonder wore the face of a child, and genius announced itself through small hands that understood machines better than most adults understood people. Rest here with us as we trace the roots of legend, as we follow the gentle current of memory back to its source in a Manhattan mansion where winter light filtered through tall windows and the future took shape one invention at a time. Anthony Edward Stark came into the world on a Friday afternoon in late May 1970, born to Howard and Maria Stark in the private wing of Manhattan's most exclusive hospital. Even as an infant, something restless moved behind his dark eyes, an intelligence that seemed to catalog every face, every sound, every sensation with the intensity of someone determined to understand how the world worked from its very foundations. The Stark family mansion rose like a monument to American achievement in the heart of Manhattan, its limestone facade speaking of old money and older traditions. Inside, the rooms stretched vast and formal, decorated with the careful precision of wealth that had learned to display itself with understated elegance. Persian rugs covered polished hardwood floors. Oil paintings in gilded frames gazed down from walls that had witnessed decades of important conversations between important people. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across ceilings painted by artists whose names appeared in museum catalogs. But it was in the spaces between this formal beauty that young Tony Stark found his true home. While other children played with wooden blocks arranged in simple patterns, Tony dismantled alarm clocks to see how time worked. His small fingers, surprisingly steady for someone so young, would trace the delicate mechanisms inside, following the path of gears and springs with the focused attention of someone born to understand how invisible forces became visible motion. The kitchen table became his laboratory, its surface covered with the scattered components of household appliances that had sacrificed themselves to his curiosity. Maria Stark would find him there in the mornings, bent over some mechanical puzzle, his dark hair falling across his forehead as he concentrated with an intensity that seemed almost supernatural in someone barely old enough to tie his shoes. She learned not to disturb these moments of discovery, understanding instinctively that her son was pursuing something essential to his nature, something that demanded respect, even when she couldn't fully comprehend its importance. While other children finger-painted pictures that decorated refrigerators and bulletin boards, Tony sketched blueprints on napkins, dreaming machines that did not yet exist. His drawings showed a sophistication that startled the adults who glimpsed them, not the random scribbles of childhood, but genuine technical diagrams that suggested someone who thought in 3 dimensions, who understood how theoretical concepts translated into physical reality. The servants whispered among themselves about the youngest Stark, about his uncanny ability to fix any broken appliance, his questions that pierced to the heart of how things worked, his restless energy that seemed to seek challenges worthy of his expanding intelligence. They spoke with mixture of admiration and concern, recognizing genius while worrying about the isolation it might bring. His father, Howard Stark, was a legend in his own right. Brilliant inventor, founder of Stark Industries, architect of tomorrow's technology, the man who had helped build Captain America's shield and win the war that defined a generation. Howard moved through the world with the confidence of someone who had shaped history, whose innovations had tilted the balance of global power, whose name commanded respect in boardrooms and laboratories across the world. Yet for all his genius, Howard remained a stranger to his own son, cold where he might have been warm, distant where he might have been present, always speaking of Captain America, that perfect soldier from a perfect war, instead of the imperfect boy who desperately wanted his attention. Picture little Tony, perhaps 6 years old, his small face serious with concentration as he drives a remote control car across the marble floors of the Stark mansion. The toy moves with precision unusual for something operated by such young hands, responding to commands with mechanical grace. Tony has modified its control systems, improved its response time, added features that transform a simple plaything into something approaching real engineering. The dining room echoes with a soft whir of electric motors as Tony navigates around chair legs and table feet, the car's movements creating a gentle counterpoint to the distant sounds of mansion life. The soft murmur of staff conversations, the whisper of expensive fabric against polished wood, the barely audible hum of climate control systems that maintain perfect temperature throughout the vast space. Howard enters during an important phone call, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that shape markets and influence governments. He paces as he talks, gesturing with his free hand, his attention focused entirely on whatever crisis or opportunity demands his immediate attention. To him, the toy car represents nothing more than a minor distraction from serious adult business. The car veers accidentally into Howard's foot during a particularly intense moment of his conversation. Howard's response is swift and sharp, a slap that sends the car skittering across the marble floor, followed by harsh words that echo in the vast spaces between father and son. "Take that nonsense somewhere else," he says, his voice cold with the irritation of a man who sees childhood as something to be outgrown as quickly as possible. "I don't need you underfoot with your toys." The car lies on its side, motors still humming softly, its careful modifications now apparently useless. Tony stares at it for a moment, his small hands clenched into fists, his face cycling through expressions too complex for someone his age. Hurt, anger, confusion, and finally a kind of resigned acceptance that speaks to lessons learned too early about the cost of disappointing people who matter. Tony runs outside into the mansion's formal gardens, his feet carrying him past carefully maintained hedges and flower beds tended by gardeners who understand that perfection requires constant attention. The afternoon air tastes of ocean salt carried inland by Pacific breezes, mixed with the scent of roses and the particular smell of wealth that comes from having enough money to make the world conform to your preferences. Edwin Jarvis finds him there, sitting on the marble steps that lead down from the mansion's main terrace to the gardens below. Tony's face shows traces of tears he refuses to shed, his small shoulders carrying a burden that seems too heavy for someone who should be worried about nothing more serious than what flavor ice cream to choose for dessert. Jarvis, the family butler, possesses something that all of Howard Stark's genius cannot provide: infinite patience married to genuine kindness. He is a man in his 50s, with gentle eyes and hands that have learned to comfort as well as serve, who understands that sometimes the most important conversations happen between adults and children rather than between adults and other adults. He sits beside the boy without speaking at first, allowing the weight of shared presence to create the kind of safety that makes honesty possible. The gardens stretch before them, immaculate in their beauty, a testament to what human effort can achieve when guided by both vision and care. Fountains play in the distance, their water catching the afternoon light like scattered diamonds. "Fathers and sons," Jarvis finally says, his voice carrying the warmth of someone who has witnessed many family struggles, who understands the particular pain that comes when love exists, but cannot find its proper expression. It's difficult to maneuver from both sides. Your father carries responsibilities that weigh heavy on his mind. Sometimes that weight makes it hard for him to see the joy in things that should bring joy. Tony wipes his nose on his sleeve, a gesture so normal and childlike that it reminds anyone watching that beneath the extraordinary intelligence lives an ordinary boy who wants nothing more complicated than his father's approval. He likes Captain America better than me, Tony says, the words carrying the particular devastation that comes when children recognize they must compete with legends for their parents' attention. Jarvis considers this with the seriousness it deserves. Captain America is a memory, he says finally. You are a person. Memories are easier to love because they never disappoint us, never challenge us, never require us to change or grow. But people, real, living people, they offer something memories cannot. They offer the possibility of joy, of surprise, of love that grows rather than love that simply persists. Inside the house, Maria Stark plays piano. Her music drifts through the evening air like a physical presence, a counterpoint to Tony's hurt that suggests beauty can exist alongside pain, that harmony can emerge from discord if someone with skill and patience guides the process. The melody she chooses is complex but gentle, requiring technical precision but expressing emotional truth, much like the conversations that happen between people who care about each other. The sound draws Tony from the steps, his curiosity about how the music works temporarily overriding his disappointment about the car. He finds his mother in the mansion's music room, her fingers dancing across the keys with a kind of unconscious grace that speaks of years spent perfecting something she loves rather than something she must do. Maria is warmth where Howard is ice, gentle where he is demanding, present where he is distant. She represents everything soft and nurturing in Tony's world, the counterbalance to his father's relentless drive toward achievement and control. Her smile when she sees him approach carries the particular warmth that mothers reserve for children who need comfort, the kind of love that asks no questions and makes no demands. Come, she says, patting the piano bench beside her. Let me show you how this works. The piano lesson that follows teaches Tony that not all beautiful things need to be understood in mechanical terms. Sometimes they simply need to be felt. Maria's hands guide his smaller ones across the keys, helping him discover how pressure and timing combine to create sound, how individual notes connect to form melodies, how mathematics and emotion can occupy the same space without competing for dominance. Tony builds his first V8 engine before his 7th birthday, an achievement that brings news cameras to the mansion and transforms a child's project into a media event. The engine sits on a specially constructed stand in the mansion's main garage, its components polished to mirror brightness, each piece assembled with the kind of precision that professionals struggle to achieve after years of training. Howard smiles for the photographs, stands behind his son with hands resting on small shoulders, speaks to reporters about Stark family tradition and the importance of nurturing young minds. But anyone watching carefully can see that his eyes remain elsewhere, already thinking about tomorrow's projects, tomorrow's meetings, tomorrow's legacy. What matters to Howard is not the boy's joy in creation, but the proof that Stark genius runs true, that the family name will continue to mean something long after he is gone. The reporters ask Tony about his plans for the future, about whether he wants to follow in his father's footsteps, about what it feels like to accomplish something so advanced at such a young age. Tony answers with the careful politeness of a child who has been coached in how to interact with adults who matter, but his real attention remains focused on the engine itself, on the elegant way its components work together to transform fuel into motion. School becomes Tony's escape, though escape is perhaps the wrong word for Phillips Academy in Andover, where brilliance is currency and he is rich beyond measure. The campus spreads across Massachusetts countryside like an advertisement for the kind of education money can provide. Brick buildings that speak of tradition, manicured grounds that suggest order, dormitories that house the children of people who shape the world through decisions made in boardrooms and government offices. Yet even surrounded by the brightest minds of his generation, Tony remains isolated, too young, too smart, too different from classmates who excel within normal parameters, while he operates in territories they cannot even recognize. His projects advance beyond anything his teachers can evaluate. His questions probe deeper than curriculum is designed to explore. His restless intelligence seeks challenges that formal education struggles to provide. The other students watch him with mixture of admiration and wariness. They recognize genius when they see it, understand that they are witnessing something extraordinary. But genius at such a young age creates distance, even among those selected for their own exceptional abilities. Tony solves problems they haven't yet learned to see. He completes assignments before they finish reading the questions. He builds things that shouldn't work, but do, that suggest possibilities beyond their imagination. Loneliness tastes like cafeteria food, eaten alone, while conversations swirl around tables he doesn't quite fit. It sounds like silence in dormitory rooms, where other boys bond over shared interests he surpassed years earlier. It feels like the weight of intelligence that brings everything except the one thing he wants most: connection with people who understand what it's like to think the way he thinks, to see the way he sees, to hunger for challenges that others can't even comprehend. He hacks into the Pentagon on a dare, not because he wants to cause trouble, but because the challenge calls to something deep inside him. The need to prove that no system is beyond his reach, no puzzle beyond his solving, no wall high enough to keep out someone who understands how digital architecture really works. The hack itself takes him less than 20 minutes, a casual demonstration of skills that government agencies spend millions developing in their most talented employees. But what he finds there matters less than what the achievement represents. For a brief moment, Tony Stark has done something that impresses even the most jaded of his classmates. For a few hours, he is not just the youngest student, the strange one, the boy who builds impossible things. He is someone they recognize as remarkable, even by their own demanding standards. The satisfaction fades, as all satisfactions do when they come too easily. What challenge remains when computer systems yield to your understanding, like locks to keys you were born carrying? What excitement survives when every puzzle reveals its secrets before you finish examining its pieces? MIT beckons when Tony is just 14, its buildings rising from Cambridge like temples devoted to the worship of human intellect. The institute represents everything he has been preparing for: classes taught by professors who understand advanced concepts, laboratories equipped with tools worthy of serious research, students who share his hunger for knowledge, even if they cannot match his capacity for acquiring it. James Rhodes becomes his roommate through the careful calculations of administrators who understand that extraordinary students need extraordinary support systems. Rhodey possesses something that Tony's intelligence cannot provide: the steady warmth of someone who sees past genius to the person underneath, who offers friendship without wanting anything in return except the pleasure of knowing someone worth knowing. Together, they dream of changing the world through different paths toward the same noble goal. Tony through innovation that pushes the boundaries of what technology can accomplish. Rhodey through service that applies existing knowledge to protect people who cannot protect themselves. They stay up late in their dormitory room, planning futures that will matter, discussing how their different gifts can complement each other in service of something larger than their individual ambitions. Rhodey becomes Tony's anchor to normal human experience, the friend who reminds him that intelligence without empathy builds walls instead of bridges, that genius without humility creates isolation instead of connection. When Tony disappears into projects for days at a time, Rhodey brings food and companionship. When Tony's frustration with slower minds creates friction with classmates, Rhodey provides translation between genius and ordinary intelligence. The friendship teaches Tony that some of life's most important lessons cannot be programmed or calculated or achieved through intellectual effort alone. Loyalty grows through shared experience, not shared understanding. Trust develops through consistent presence, not superior performance. Love emerges from acceptance rather than admiration, from seeing someone clearly and choosing to remain close despite everything that might drive you apart. By 17, Tony has graduated summa cum laude, collected awards that recognize achievements beyond his years, built robots that anticipate his needs with almost supernatural accuracy. Dummy and you, his mechanical companions, follow him around his institute laboratory like loyal pets, their programming sophisticated enough to respond to his moods, intelligent enough to assist with complex tasks, devoted enough to remain patient when he grows frustrated with their limitations. These robots are more than machines. They are the family he builds for himself, when the family he was born into proves insufficient for his emotional needs. Programmed with loyalty that never wavers and affection that never dims, they represent everything he wishes human relationships could provide: understanding without judgment, assistance without expectation, presence without the complications that come from trying to navigate the complex needs of beings as intelligent as he is. Graduation day arrives with June sunshine and the weight of infinite possibility. The ceremony unfolds on MIT's campus like a celebration of human potential, with speeches about responsibility and opportunity, about the graduates' obligation to use their knowledge in service of something greater than themselves. Tony sits among his classmates, diploma earned through work that challenged even his exceptional abilities, future stretching ahead like an unopened gift. He returns home to find Howard by the pool, distant as always, speaking of plans and potential rather than pride and love. Their conversation feels like negotiations between strangers, each trying to communicate across a gulf that has been widening for years. Howard speaks of the future as if it were another engineering problem to be solved through proper application of intelligence and resources. Tony speaks of freedom and choice, as if these were concepts his father might eventually learn to understand. Neither truly hears the other. Howard sees in his son the continuation of Stark family legacy, the inheritor of an empire that will outlast his own mortality. Tony sees in his father the author of expectations he did not choose, responsibilities he did not request, a path laid out with such precision that it leaves no room for the kind of exploration his mind demands. 12 hours later, Howard and Maria leave for the Bahamas. Christmas vacation, they call it, though Christmas still weeks away. Tony watches their car disappear down the mansion's circular driveway, unaware that this casual farewell will be the last time he sees them alive. The car carries his parents toward an appointment with destiny that no amount of genius can prevent, no degree of wealth can postpone, no depth of love can undo. The phone call comes on a December morning, cold with winter and devastating news. Car accident, the authorities say, their voices carrying the practiced sympathy of people who deliver terrible news professionally. Icy roads and twisted metal, and lives ended in an instant. Investigation reveals nothing suspicious, just the random cruelty of circumstance meeting physics, in a way that transforms living people into memory and grief. 21-year-old Tony stands before their caskets in the mansion's main hall, his parents reduced to flowers and sympathetic faces, and the terrible finality of polished wood that will never open again. The viewing draws hundreds of people, business associates and government officials and social acquaintances who speak in whispers about what a loss this represents for American industry, for technological progress, for the kind of visionary leadership that shapes the future through sheer force of will. This wasn't part of my plan, Tony whispers to the air, his voice carrying the particular devastation that comes from discovering that all the intelligence in the world cannot protect you from the random cruelties of existence. Planning could not have prevented this loss. Genius cannot build a shield around the people you love. Money cannot purchase immortality for anyone, no matter how much you need them to remain present in your life. Inheriting Stark Industries feels like wearing clothes that do not fit. Tony is young, brilliant, grieving, suddenly responsible for an empire built over decades by someone whose vision he understood but never fully shared. Obadiah Stane guides him through those early months with the steady presence of someone who has helped Howard build this company, who understands its rhythms and requirements, who can translate the complexities of corporate leadership into terms that a grieving genius can comprehend and act upon. Together, they transform the company from successful to extraordinary, from profitable to essential. Weapons technology becomes their specialty. Defense contracts their foundation. Innovation, their currency in the marketplace of global power. Money flows like water, accumulating in accounts that grow beyond any reasonable need. Power concentrates in their hands like gravity, drawing smaller objects into its influence. The work provides distraction from loss, purpose beyond grief, proof that Howard's legacy will continue to matter long after his death. Each new contract represents vindication of the Stark family approach to business. Identify what the world needs, build it better than anyone else can, charge what it's worth, rather than what the market expects to pay. In the quiet hours, Tony builds JARVIS, just a rather very intelligent system. named for Edwin Jarvis, the butler who showed him kindness when kindness was rare, who sat beside him in gardens and spoke gently about the complications of being father and son, who understood that genius without compassion builds walls instead of bridges. This artificial intelligence becomes his confessor, his companion, his way of keeping warmth alive in rooms that echo with absence. Jarvis possesses infinite patience and programmed loyalty, responds to his needs without judgment, provides assistance without expecting anything in return. The perfect companion for someone who has learned that human relationships carry risks that mechanical ones do not. The years blur together in a symphony of success. Magazines feature him on their covers, alongside headlines that chronicle his latest achievement, his newest innovation, his most recent proof that genius applied to commerce produces results that reshape industries. Women orbit his wealth like satellites around a star, attracted to the power and glamour without necessarily understanding the loneliness that exists at the center. Weapons dealers compete for his attention, offering contracts that represent not just money, but influence, the opportunity to shape global events through the technology he chooses to create and sell. Stock prices rise at his word, fall at his silence, responding to his decisions with a kind of immediate impact that confirms his importance in the grand scheme of international affairs. Yet, for all his achievements, Tony remains that boy on the garden steps, brilliant and restless and alone. Success has brought everything he thought he wanted, but nothing he actually needed. Wealth beyond measure, genius beyond question, freedom beyond limit, and still the echo of emptiness in spaces between accomplishments. The workshop becomes his sanctuary, the one place where Tony Stark feels most like himself. Not the celebrity photographed at charity galas, not the CEO whose decisions move markets, not the heir to Howard Stark's empire of innovation and influence. Just a man who builds things, beautiful, impossible things that respond to intelligence and patience rather than charm and wealth. Here, surrounded by the patient hum of machinery, he creates the impossible and calls it Tuesday. Robotic arms assist his work with mechanical precision that never varies, never disappoints, never demands more than he is prepared to give. Holographic displays show him tomorrow's possibilities, rendered in light and mathematics. Potential given visual form that he can manipulate and improve and perfect. You might think such a life would satisfy anyone. Wealth beyond measure, genius beyond question, freedom beyond limit. Yet something hollow echoes in the spaces between achievements. Something hungry that all his accomplishments cannot feed. Success without purpose. Brilliance without meaning. Everything you thought you wanted, wrapped around a heart that beats alone. The boy in the workshop grows into a man, but some hungers never fade. Some questions never find their answers in technology, or money, or acclaim. Sometimes it takes losing everything to discover what actually matters. Sometimes it takes having everything to realize that everything is not enough. Afghanistan waits on the horizon like a promise and a threat. Change comes whether we are ready or not, whether we want it or not, whether we understand it or not. And in the quiet hours before dawn, surrounded by machines that hum with patient purpose, Tony Stark prepares for a demonstration that will demonstrate more than he knows, that will change more than he intends, that will teach him the difference between having everything and having something worth losing. Let your breathing slow now, matching the gentle rhythm of those distant machines. Rest in this moment before everything changes, when genius still believed that intelligence could solve any problem, that money could buy any solution, that success measured in numbers could satisfy hungers that have no name. Sleep comes easier when we understand that even legends began as children who built circuit boards at 4 years old and dreamed of worlds that did not yet exist. Afghanistan arrives with morning heat and the weight of demonstration. Let your shoulders settle deeper now, releasing any tension you might be carrying from the day behind you. We are going to spend time in the desert, in the heat and dust, and the particular quality of light that exists where ancient landscapes meet modern ambitions. But you are safe here, warm and comfortable, free to rest, while this story unfolds like memory made visible. Tony Stark steps off his private jet into air that tastes of dust and diesel fuel, accompanied by James Rhodes and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you have built something extraordinary. The aircraft's engines wind down with a particular whine of turbines designed for power rather than efficiency, their sound echoing off the mountains that ring this temporary military outpost like sleeping giants carved from stone and time. The heat hits immediately, not the dry warmth of California desert, but something heavier, layered with the scent of equipment and machinery, the particular smell of a place where technology meets ancient landscape in ways that neither was designed to accommodate. The air shimmers with heat mirages that make distant objects dance like memories at the edge of consciousness. Military personnel move with practiced efficiency across the makeshift base, their uniforms already dark with sweat despite the early hour. Vehicles sit arranged in precise rows, their metal surfaces too hot to touch comfortably, their engines ticking with the sound of cooling metal. Everything here serves function over form, practical, temporary, designed to accomplish specific objectives, rather than to last or to impress. Tony moves through this landscape like someone visiting a foreign country where he speaks the language but doesn't understand the culture. His expensive clothes feel wrong in this environment, too fine for a place where survival depends on reliability rather than appearance. The soldiers watch him with the particular mixture of respect and wariness that civilians inspire in people whose job involves protecting those civilians from things they prefer not to think about. The Jericho missile waits for its moment in a specially constructed bunker, its components arranged with the kind of precision that military specifications demand. Each piece has been inspected, tested, calibrated to perform exactly as designed under conditions that stress test both materials and craftsmanship. The weapon itself represents years of research and development, millions of dollars in funding, the kind of technological advancement that changes the balance of power between nations. The demonstration unfolds exactly as scripted, a carefully choreographed display of American technological superiority, designed to impress potential customers who understand that superior firepower often determines which causes survive and which disappear into the dusty margins of history. Military officials gather in whatever shade they can find, while Tony explains his creation with trademark charm and casual arrogance, his voice carrying easily across the assembled crowd. He speaks of precision targeting, of surgical strikes that minimize collateral damage, of the kind of overwhelming force projection that ends conflicts quickly rather than allowing them to fester across years of incremental violence. The language comes easily, He has given similar presentations dozens of times in air-conditioned conference rooms to audiences wearing $1,000 suits. But the underlying message remains the same. Stark Industries builds tools that shape the world. The missile launches with a roar that reverberates off surrounding mountains, its trajectory a perfect arc against the blue sky that speaks of mathematics made manifest, of calculations transformed into physical reality. For a moment, it hangs suspended at the apex of its flight, a metal star against infinite blue, then descends toward its target with the inevitability of gravity and superior engineering. The explosion that follows rewrites the landscape. Where moments before stood carefully constructed targets meant to simulate enemy installations, now only smoking craters remain, the earth itself carved into new shapes by forces that reduce steel and concrete to component atoms. The sound reaches them as thunder without warning, deep, primal, the kind of noise that reminds everyone present that they are witnessing the application of power beyond human scale. Applause follows, the sound of gloved hands meeting in appreciation for engineering excellence, for the kind of innovation that transforms theoretical physics into practical advantage. Handshakes seal deals that will channel weapons to friendly nations, contracts that will keep American technology in the hands of American allies, relationships that will endure long after this particular demonstration fades into military history. For peace of mind, Tony tells the assembled crowd, raising his glass of whiskey that somehow tastes better in the desert heat, its burn a counterpoint to the satisfaction of successful engineering and profitable commerce. The irony will taste bitter in memory. Peace purchased through superior firepower, security built on others' destruction, safety achieved by ensuring that friendly forces possess overwhelming advantage when violence becomes necessary. This is the stark way, inherited from Howard and perfected by his son. Build bigger, strike harder, win decisively. Don't question whether conflicts are necessary. Only ensure that when they happen, the right side possesses the tools to prevail. Technology serves those who can afford it. Power accumulates in the hands of those with resources to purchase it. And global stability depends on keeping the most dangerous weapons in the most responsible hands. The convoy departs as all convoys do, a line of armored vehicles crossing hostile terrain, carrying precious cargo towards safety through landscapes that have witnessed centuries of conflict between people who disagreed about fundamental questions of how life should be lived, how resources should be distributed, how power should be exercised. The vehicles move in careful formation, their spacing calculated to minimize vulnerability while maximizing mutual support. Tony sits in the back of a Humvee that smells of canvas and metal and the particular scent of equipment designed for reliability rather than comfort. The interior carries traces of previous passengers, coffee stains, and dust, and the indefinable smell of people who live with constant awareness that safety is temporary, that vigilance is the price of returning home to families who wait with varying degrees of confidence that their loved ones will survive whatever missions require their presence in places like this. The soldiers who surround him are young, their faces carrying the mixture of confidence and nervousness that comes from training for situations they hope never to encounter. They ask about supermodels and tabloids, about wealth and celebrity, about a life so distant from theirs it might as well exist on another planet. Their questions come from genuine curiosity about a world they've seen in magazines but never touched, a reality that exists parallel to their own without ever intersecting. Tony answers with the practiced charm of someone accustomed to being fascinating to people whose lives follow different rhythms than his own. He speaks of parties and premieres, of decisions that move markets and innovations that reshape industries, of the particular pleasures that come from having enough money to transform any desire into reality. The conversation provides distraction from the heat and dust and the subtle tension that accompanies travel through territory where not everyone wishes them well. Everything changes in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The explosion comes without warning, a burst of flame and metal that transforms the lead vehicle into twisted wreckage, its components scattered across the desert floor like pieces of a puzzle that will never again form recognizable shapes. The sound hits them first, then the shockwave, then the terrible understanding that what began as routine transport has become something else entirely. Soldiers pour from the remaining trucks, with movements that speak of training transformed into instinct, their weapons ready before conscious thought processes can fully catalog what has happened. The desert around them erupts into motion as hidden positions reveal themselves, muzzle flashes appearing like deadly stars in the heat shimmer distance. Radio chatter fills the air with urgent voices requesting support, reporting casualties, coordinating response to an attack that no one saw coming until it was too late to prevent. Tony watches in stunned horror as men he was joking with moments before fall under enemy fire, their lives ending with mechanical precision, their stories concluding in ways that no training manual adequately prepares anyone to witness. These soldiers, with their families and dreams and plans for after deployment, become statistics in a conflict that exists beyond his understanding, casualties in a war that suddenly feels personal, in ways that balance sheets and profit margins never did. The sound of gunfire fills the desert air, sharp and final and wrong. Not the controlled explosions of weapon demonstrations, but the chaotic staccato of combat where accuracy matters more than precision, where speed counts more than elegance, where survival depends on making correct decisions faster than the people trying to kill you. Panic moves through Tony's body like electricity, his nervous system responding to danger with reactions that evolution designed for threats that faced his ancestors in different environments but similar situations. His hands shake as he fumbles for the phone that represents connection to a world where problems can be solved through money and influence rather than firepower and speed. Around him, the convoy dies piece by piece. Good men with families and dreams reduced to memory and regret, their sacrifice buying time for those who might yet escape, their training allowing them to maintain formation and discipline, even as their situation deteriorates beyond any hope of successful conclusion. They fight because fighting is what they trained to do, because their presence here serves purposes larger than their individual survival, because someone must bear the cost of decisions made by people who will never personally face the consequences of those choices. Then comes the moment that will divide Tony Stark's life into before and after. A missile lands near his hiding place, its metal surface still smoking from launch, its shape familiar in ways that make his mind reject what his eyes plainly show him. Through the dust and chaos, through the heat shimmer and confusion. Tony reads the words painted on its side with the kind of clarity that trauma sometimes provides. Stark Industries. His name, his company, his creation. The weapon that will end his life bears his signature like a cruel joke, like the universe's commentary on the distance between intention and result, between the comfortable abstractions of corporate strategy and the sharp-edged reality of what those strategies produce when they meet the world beyond conference rooms and stockholder meetings. He tries to run. The desert floor burns through his expensive shoes, the heat and chaos and desperation combining into something that overwhelms his ability to process experience in any organized way. But genius cannot outpace explosions. Intelligence cannot deflect shrapnel. All the money in the world cannot purchase immunity from the laws of physics when those laws are applied with explosive force. The blast throws him backward into darkness, embedding fragments of his own weapons deep in his chest, near the heart that has pumped blood through his body for 37 years without requiring conscious attention, that now struggles to continue its work around the foreign objects that have taken up residence between his ribs. Pain becomes everything, not just sensation, but the entire universe, reduced to the simple message that something is very wrong, that survival is no longer guaranteed, that the body he has taken for granted may no longer be capable of sustaining the mind it carries. Consciousness becomes optional. Time stretches and contracts like light passing through water, moments extending into eternities, while eternities collapse into instants. Sometimes he is aware of voices speaking languages he does not recognize, of hands working on his chest with desperate skill, of instruments and procedures that feel like violence but serve healing, of the thin line between medical intervention and torture when survival requires actions that increase suffering in service of continued existence. Other times he drifts in spaces between life and death, where dreams and memory interweave until past and present lose their distinction. He sees his father's face, speaking words of disappointment, his mother's hands playing piano melodies that will never again fill empty rooms with beauty, Jensen's eyes carrying kindness toward a stranger who once dismissed him without thought. Light fades and returns, fades and returns, each cycle a little dimmer than before, like a battery slowly losing its ability to hold charge. Medical equipment beeps and hums with mechanical patience, monitoring functions that usually manage themselves without requiring external observation. The boundary between consciousness and unconsciousness becomes permeable, allowing experiences to float back and forth until he cannot distinguish between what happens in the world and what happens in the country of pain that exists behind his closed eyelids. When awareness finally stabilizes, Tony finds himself in a cave. The space feels ancient, carved from living rock by forces that operated long before human civilization, then modified by human need into something that serves current purposes without losing its connection to geological time. Water drips steadily somewhere in the darkness, each drop marking time in a rhythm that has continued for millennia, will continue for millennia after current circumstances resolve into memory and dust. The walls show tool marks where determined effort has expanded natural spaces into something more useful. Sleeping areas, workspaces, storage for equipment, and supplies that support life in a place never intended for extended human habitation. The air carries the scent of stone and earth and the particular smell of underground places where sunlight penetrates only by reflection, where temperature remains constant regardless of surface weather. A car battery sits connected to his chest by crude wiring, its weight both literal and metaphorical. The electromagnet installed between his ribs keeps shrapnel from piercing his heart, keeps him alive by the thinnest of margins. Its electronic pulse, a mechanical substitute for the biological processes that can no longer function normally. Each heartbeat now depends on electrical current, flowing through cables that snake across his body like technological veins. The device pulses with steady rhythm, its operation visible through indicators that glow in the cave's dim lighting. Tony stares at these lights with the fascination of someone discovering that his continued existence depends on understanding completely foreign technology, that survival now requires attention to details that once fell within someone else's area of expertise. Ho Yinsen sits nearby, watching with eyes that hold both kindness and sorrow, the expression of someone who has seen too much suffering to be surprised by finding more, but retains enough humanity to feel genuine compassion for each individual instance of pain. His face bears the marks of hardship, lines carved by experiences that age people faster than time alone, the particular exhaustion that comes from caring for others when resources are limited and hope requires daily renewal. "Mr. Stark," he says, and his voice carries the weight of shared captivity, the recognition that two men who might never have spoken under normal circumstances are now bound together by situation neither chose nor desired. "I am Dr. Yinsen. We met before in Bern, although you were quite drunk at the time." The memory surfaces slowly through the haze of medication and trauma. A science conference, too much alcohol, too little attention paid to introductions that seemed unimportant at the time. Yinsen, the brilliant surgeon Tony barely acknowledged in his arrogance, now the man keeping him alive in a cave that smells of diesel fuel and despair, and the particular odor of places where hope hangs by threads that require careful tending. The universe has a sense of irony that cuts deeper than any blade. The man Tony dismissed without thought has become the only thing standing between him and death. The stranger he ignored has transformed into the most important relationship of his life. Genius and wealth and social position mean nothing here, only knowledge and skill and the willingness to extend care to someone who has done nothing to earn such kindness. Yinsen explains their situation with clinical precision that cannot entirely hide the horror beneath professional language. They are prisoners of the 10 Rings, a terrorist organization that profits from chaos and feeds on instability, that sees conflict not as tragedy to be avoided, but as opportunity to be exploited. Their captors operate in the spaces between governments, in the margins where official authority cannot reach, where violence provides the only currency that reliably produces results. The cave system extends far beyond their current location, connecting chambers that serve different purposes: weapons storage, training areas, command centers where decisions are made that will affect the lives of people who will never know the names of those who determine their fate. Outside their makeshift prison, Tony's own creations guard their captors, Stark Industries weapons, maintaining security around men who use American technology to fight American objectives. Abu Bakr, leader of this cell, makes their situation clear through Yinsen's translation, his words carrying the weight of absolute authority within this carefully constructed domain. Build the weapon, he says, and earn your freedom. Demonstrate the same genius that has made Tony Stark wealthy and famous, but apply it in service of causes that exist beyond the comfortable abstractions of corporate strategy and profit maximization. Tony knows this for the lie it is. Dead men tell no tales. Dead weapons designers build no countermeasures. Dead billionaires cannot testify about their experiences to audiences who might use such information to disrupt carefully constructed operations. The promise of freedom serves only to motivate compliance until compliance is no longer necessary, until the work is complete and the workers become liabilities rather than assets. The first night passes like a fever dream, time measured not by clocks, but by the rhythm of pain medication wearing off and being renewed, by the cycle of sleeping and waking that injury imposes regardless of external circumstances. Tony sits by the fire when consciousness permits, staring into flames that dance with shadows and regret, trying to process the distance between the world he knew and the world he now inhabits. Everything he has built, everything he has achieved, has led to this moment of perfect irony. His weapons, designed to protect American soldiers and advance American interests, now hold him prisoner in a cave where survival depends on cooperation with people who use his technology to oppose everything he thought he supported. His genius, celebrated in boardrooms and universities, means nothing here except as a tool to be exploited by those who see brilliance not as achievement, but as resource. This is your legacy, Tony Stark, Yinsen says quietly, his voice carrying none of the judgment such words might suggest, but rather the sadness of someone who has witnessed the distance between good intentions and evil results, who understands that moral complexity rarely reduces to simple equations of right and wrong. Outside their chamber, guards patrol with Stark Industries rifles slung over their shoulders, their movements casual with the confidence that comes from possessing superior firepower. Inside, two brilliant men begin planning their escape from a prison built of American ingenuity and global commerce gone wrong. Their conversations conducted in whispers that must not carry beyond stone walls that have heard too many secrets already. Days blur into each other in the artificial twilight of their prison, time marked by the arrival of meals that provide sustenance without pleasure, by the rhythm of guard changes that suggest order beyond their small sphere of awareness. Tony begins the work his captors demand, breaking apart weapons to access their components, pretending compliance while planning defiance, using skills learned in MIT laboratories to serve purposes those professors never intended. But his real project remains hidden behind false panels and misdirection, concealed within work that appears to serve his captor's objectives, while actually advancing his own desperate plans for survival. The arc reactor takes shape in his imagination first, then in crude diagrams scratched on surfaces where casual observation will not detect them. Finally, in careful construction that must proceed slowly enough to avoid drawing attention. A miniature fusion reactor, a sun small enough to fit in his chest, powerful enough to keep him alive, efficient enough to power much more than the electromagnet that currently maintains his heartbeat. The concept challenges everything he knows about energy generation, requires innovations that push beyond proven theory into territory where failure means death, but success means hope. Working beside Yinsen teaches Tony lessons his MIT education never covered: how to build with limited resources, using salvaged components and improvised tools to create something that should require factory precision and laboratory conditions, how to create under pressure when every moment of work carries risk of discovery, when mistakes cannot be corrected through iteration and refinement, how to find hope when hope seems impossible, when circumstances reduce all possibilities to two basic options: escape or death. Yinsen's steady hands assist the delicate work, while his steady voice shares stories that make their situation bearable. Tales of his village, his patience, the life interrupted by war and circumstance, but not abandoned, not surrendered to despair. "Tell me," Yinsen says during one of their quiet moments, his words spoken softly to avoid detection by guards who might find their conversation suspicious. "What is it that you do that you think is so important?" Tony's answer comes automatically, shaped by years of interviews and presentations where such questions provided opportunities to showcase achievements and justify decisions. Business deals that reshape markets, weapons contracts that influence global power balances, technological advancement that pushes human capability beyond previous limitations, profit margins that prove the value of innovation applied to practical problems. The metrics of success that have defined his adult life flow easily from his lips, each accomplishment a brick in the wall he has built around himself, each achievement proof that Tony Stark matters in ways that extend beyond personal gratification. But speaking them aloud in this cave makes them sound hollow, like currency from a country that no longer exists, like answers to questions that were never actually important. "And your family?" Yinsen asks, his voice carrying the gentle persistence of someone who recognizes the difference between what people say and what they mean, who understands that true questions often hide behind obvious ones. The question sits in the air between them, waiting for an answer that refuses to come easily. Family, parents dead for years, their love complicated by distance and misunderstanding that never resolved into the kind of closeness that death makes precious rather than tragic. No wife, no children, no one waiting for his return except stockholders and employees and the mechanical arms in his workshop that will wait forever if necessary, that will continue their patient operations until someone remembers to turn them off. Success, Tony realizes, has bought him everything except the things that actually matter. Wealth that can purchase any material desire, but cannot buy the presence of people who care whether he lives or dies for reasons beyond financial calculation. Genius that can solve any technical problem, but cannot address the fundamental isolation that comes from being smarter than almost everyone around you, that creates distance, even when proximity should create connection. Power that can influence global events, but cannot protect him from the consequences of his own decisions, cannot shield him from the recognition that his weapons serve purposes beyond his control, cannot insulate him from responsibility for what others do with the tools he provides them. A man who has everything, Yinsen observes gently, his words carrying the weight of someone who has learned to see clearly through the comfortable abstractions that usually shield wealthy people from recognizing their own poverty and nothing. The arc reactor takes shape in Tony's chest and in his plans, hours of delicate work creating something unprecedented in human technology. The device requires precision that pushes his skills beyond anything he has attempted before, demands attention to detail that leaves no room for error, tests his ability to work with salvaged materials and improvised tools while maintaining standards that will determine whether he lives or dies. Light glows blue-white in the darkness of their prison when the first successful test illuminates the cave like artificial dawn, casting shadows that dance across stone walls, carved by geological time and modified by human need. The reactor pulses with steady rhythm, its operation visible through indicators that confirm successful fusion at scales previously thought impossible. Power generation that opens possibilities neither of them had dared hope for. A star born in captivity, hope given physical form that can be touched and measured and relied upon. The electromagnet in Tony's chest draws power from fusion processes that mirror the sun, his heartbeat now sustained by the same forces that warm planets and grow plants and make life possible throughout the universe. But the true project remains hidden behind false panels and misdirection, concealed within work that their captors believe serves their objectives, while actually advancing plans they cannot comprehend. While the 10 rings think Tony builds them a weapon that will increase their power and extend their reach, he constructs something else entirely. A suit of armor, crude and desperate and beautiful in its impossibility. Metal salvaged from his own weapons provides raw material that irony makes especially appropriate. Power drawn from his artificial heart flows through systems cobbled together with genius and necessity, and the absolute refusal to die in this cave without making some attempt to determine his own fate, rather than leaving that determination to others. The design challenges everything he knows about engineering, requires innovations that push beyond proven theory into territory where mathematical models provide guidance but cannot guarantee results. Each component must serve multiple purposes, conserve weight while providing strength, integrate with other systems while maintaining independent operation when coordination fails. Weeks pass in the strange routine of apparent compliance, concealing actual defiance, of building what appears to be one thing while actually creating something entirely different. Work and planning, hope and fear, the steady presence of a friendship made in the worst possible circumstances, tested by shared danger and mutual dependence that creates bonds deeper than those forged in comfort and safety. Yinsen shares stories of his village during the quiet hours when their work allows conversation, painting pictures of a life interrupted but not destroyed, of patients who waited for his return until waiting became impossible, of a medical practice that served people whose names would never appear in journals, but whose lives mattered just as much as those of famous patients treated in famous hospitals. He speaks of his understanding of the world beyond cave walls, of political complexities that reduce human beings to abstractions in games played by people who never personally face the consequences of their decisions, of the distance between official policies and individual experiences, of how good intentions become evil results when filtered through institutions that prioritize efficiency over empathy. Tony learns to value conversation over solitude, companionship over independence, connection over achievement. These lessons come slowly, resisted by habits formed over decades of self-reliance, but Yinsen's patient presence gradually teaches him that some forms of wealth cannot be measured in dollars. Some forms of genius cannot be calibrated by test scores. Some forms of success cannot be evaluated by market metrics. We should go, Tony says one morning, when the armor design finally resolves into something that might actually work. When theoretical possibilities crystallize into practical plans that require only execution to test their validity. The suit sits ready in his imagination, if not yet in complete reality. Metal plates that will lock together with mechanical precision, systems that will integrate with elegant simplicity, power flows that will transform his body into something capable of actions currently beyond human capability. Freedom waits beyond these cave walls, purchased with courage and innovation and desperate hope, requiring only the willingness to risk everything on the possibility that genius applied with sufficient determination can overcome circumstances that seem to permit no escape. I will see my family again, Jensen replies, but something in his voice suggests a different meaning than Tony understands. Words that carry weight beyond their surface message, implications that will become clear only when events make their deeper meaning visible. The final assembly happens in stolen moments between inspections, when guard schedules create brief opportunities for work that cannot be disguised as compliance with their captors' demands. Metal plates locked together with mechanical precision that satisfies Tony's engineering instincts even under these desperate circumstances. Power systems integrate with elegant simplicity that proves good design transcends available resources. The suit grows around Tony like a second skin, heavy with possibility and desperate with need, its weight both burden and promise. Each component brings them closer to freedom or disaster, each successful integration proof that theory can become practice when necessity provides sufficient motivation. The arc reactor in Tony's chest connects to the suit's systems through cables that carry more than electrical current. They carry hope transformed into action, genius applied to survival, the accumulated knowledge of 37 years focused on the single objective of living long enough to make his captors regret their decision to keep him alive, long enough to build them a weapon. For the first time since the explosion that brought him here, Tony Stark feels powerful. Not the abstract power that comes from wealth and position, but the immediate power that flows from understanding exactly how to achieve specific objectives, from possessing tools adequate to accomplish necessary tasks, from being ready to act when action becomes possible. Their captors sense something wrong before they know what it is. Their instincts, shaped by years of survival in environments where alertness determines who lives and who dies, where small changes in routine often signal larger changes in circumstance. Footsteps echo in the corridor outside their workshop with rhythms that suggest urgency rather than routine patrol. Voices rise in agitation, carrying tones that speak of suspicion rather than casual conversation. Weapons ready for violence with mechanical sounds that have become familiar over weeks of captivity. Magazines sliding into place, safeties clicking off, chambers receiving rounds that will soon seek targets. Discovery comes whether they are prepared or not, whether their preparations are complete or inadequate, whether their timing serves their needs or forces them to act before they are ready. They're coming, Jensen whispers, fear and determination warring in his voice, the conflict between desire to live and willingness to sacrifice that defines courage under circumstances where survival and heroism become mutually exclusive choices. The armor requires time to charge, time they do not have, time that can only be purchased through sacrifice that someone must volunteer to make. Power flows from the arc reactor to the suit systems with measurable rate that cannot be accelerated through wish or will or desperation, only through the patient operation of physical laws that recognize no exceptions for emergency circumstances. Someone must buy that time with blood and breath and the weight of sacrifice that transforms ordinary people into heroes, not through choice, but through circumstances that reduce all options to those that serve others rather than self. Someone must run into gunfire to give genius room to breathe, must draw attention away from charging systems and technological miracles, must offer themselves as targets to protect something more valuable than their individual survival. Jensen makes the choice before Tony can stop him, before conscious thought can evaluate alternatives, before the situation can be analyzed for solutions that might serve everyone's needs instead of requiring someone's death. One moment, they are planning together, partners in desperation working toward shared objectives. The next, Jensen races toward the cave entrance, shouting in languages Tony doesn't understand, but whose meaning transcends translation, drawing their captor's attention away from the charging armor and the man inside it, pulling focus toward himself and away from the technological miracle that represents their only hope of escape. His sacrifice measured not in intentions but in results, not in what he hopes to accomplish, but in what his actions actually achieve for the person whose life he values more than his own. Gunfire echoes through the cave system, like thunder trapped underground, each shot amplified by stone walls, until individual weapons blur into a continuous roar of violence. Shouts in multiple languages create symphony of chaos, where death and desperation meet training and determination, where good people die for causes that matter less than the simple fact that they chose to risk everything for others. The sounds of a man trading his life for another's freedom, purchasing hope with the currency of sacrifice, offering everything he has left to give someone else the chance to escape, to survive, to carry forward the possibility that this suffering will mean something beyond the immediate tragedy of its occurrence. Tony's systems come online as Jensen's life fades away, power flowing through the suit like blood through veins, awakening capabilities that transform him from prisoner into something else entirely. Weapon systems activate with electronic precision. Motors engage with mechanical efficiency. Sensors provide information that expands his awareness beyond human limitations. The workshop door explodes outward as Tony Stark emerges from his cocoon, transformed by necessity and loss, and the steady presence of a friend who asked for nothing except the chance to mean something, to matter in ways that extend beyond personal survival, to participate in something larger than individual preservation. But transformation comes too late for the person who made it possible. The battle that follows feels like justice delivered through technology, like moral equations balanced through applied physics, like the universe finally providing tools adequate to address problems that seem to permit no solutions. Flames from his suit's weapons consume the stockpile of Stark Industries weapons that armed his captors, reducing his own creations to their component elements, erasing the tools that enabled their imprisonment. Explosions shake the cave system as Tony methodically destroys everything that connects him to this place of captivity and awakening, everything that represents the distance between his intentions and their consequences, everything that proves how good ideas can serve evil purposes when they escape the control of their creators. Metal glows red hot under sustained flame as missiles and rifles and ammunition surrender their stored energy in uncontrolled bursts that fill underground chambers with light brighter than any sun. The air tastes of smoke and superheated metal, and the particular scent of destruction that serves justice, of violence that protects rather than threatens, of power applied to restore balance rather than to upset it. But revenge tastes hollow when paid for with friendship, when victory requires mourning, when escape means leaving behind the person who made escape possible. Justice delivered through violence carries its own weight of regret, its own burden of recognition that some problems cannot be solved without creating new problems, that some victories exact prices that make celebration inappropriate. Tony finds Yinsen in the entrance tunnel, lying among the rocks where his sacrifice bought precious time, where his life transformed into gift, freely given without expectation of reciprocity. Blood stains the cave floor with patterns that speak of arterial damage beyond medical repair, of wounds that serve their purpose by ending quickly rather than prolonging suffering. Breath comes shallow and final, each exhalation carrying a little less life than the one before. The biological processes that sustained consciousness gradually surrendering to physics that recognizes no exceptions for good people who deserve better outcomes. Eyes that showed only kindness prepare to close forever, their light fading like sunset that arrives precisely on schedule, regardless of whether anyone wants day to continue. Don't waste your life, Yinsen whispers, each word a gift and a burden, advice that carries the weight of someone who has spent his final moments ensuring that his death serves purposes larger than individual preservation. His hand reaches toward something only he can see, toward destinations that exist beyond physical reality, toward reunions that wait in countries that maps cannot chart. Understanding comes too late, arriving with the cruel timing that characterizes so much human insight. Yinsen's family died long before this cave, long before the 10 rings, long before their friendship bloomed in captivity like flowers that grow in impossible places through sheer determination to create beauty despite hostile circumstances. He stayed for Tony, fought for Tony, died for Tony, because sometimes strangers become family when family has been lost to circumstance and war, because sometimes the most important relationships begin with random encounters that circumstances transform into something sacred. His sacrifice was not tactical calculation, but human choice, not strategic decision, but personal gift, not military necessity, but love expressed through actions that require no explanation beyond their fundamental generosity. Tony kneels beside his friend as the light fades from eyes that saw potential in a man who had forgotten his own capacity for growth, who recognized worth in someone who had lost track of what actually mattered, who offered friendship without conditions to someone who had never learned to value relationships that demanded nothing beyond presence and patience. The weight of grief settles into the space between his ribs, heavier than the arc reactor, deeper than any wound, more permanent than any technology he might develop to address physical problems. This pain serves no function, provides no benefit, teaches no useful lessons except the terrible truth that love makes loss inevitable, that caring creates vulnerability, that connections between people carry risks, that safety requires avoiding. Yet he would not trade this grief for the numbness he carried before, would not exchange this pain for the comfortable isolation that wealth and genius provided, would not return to a life where nothing mattered enough to cause such devastation when it was lost. Better to hurt for good reasons than to feel nothing for no reasons. Better to grieve for someone worth grieving than to remain protected from all possibility of loss. The suit lifts him into Afghanistan's bright sky. Moments later, metal wings spreading against the blue like rebirth given form, like transformation made visible through technology that serves human need rather than human convenience. Below, the 10 Rings base burns with flames that smell of justice and regret, and the end of one life, the beginning of another. The desert spreads beneath him like the surface of an alien planet, all heat, shimmer, and ancient stone, and the particular beauty of landscapes that have witnessed so much history. They seem to exist outside normal time. Mountains rise in the distance like sleeping giants, their peaks catching sunlight that has traveled millions of miles to paint shadow and highlight across terrain carved by forces that operate on scales human civilization can barely comprehend. Tony crashes in the desert when the armor's power fails, systems designed for brief operation surrendering to the mathematical certainties that govern energy consumption and storage capacity. But he is no longer the same man who entered that cave weeks earlier as prisoner and emerged minutes earlier as something else entirely. Genius has learned the weight of consequences, discovered that intelligence without wisdom creates problems that intelligence alone cannot solve, that building things without considering who will use them, or how they will use them, or why they will use them, leads inevitably to situations where good intentions produce evil results. Wealth has discovered the poverty of isolation, found that money can purchase everything except the things that actually matter, that success measured in dollars and influence provides poor foundation for the kind of satisfaction that makes life worth living rather than simply worth surviving. The merchant of death has met the price of his merchandise, paid in the coin of friendship and sacrifice, and the terrible clarity that comes from seeing yourself reflected in another's generosity, from understanding that your impact on the world extends far beyond your intentions, from recognizing that power creates responsibility, whether you choose to accept that responsibility or not. James Rhodes finds him in the sand hours later, helicopters bringing rescue and questions, and the slow return to a world that will never look the same. The aircraft circles overhead like mechanical angels, their rotors beating rhythms that promise safety and transportation to places where advanced medical care can address the technical problems of keeping someone alive when their body has sustained damage beyond normal repair capabilities. Tony climbs into the aircraft that will carry him home, but home itself has become a foreign country. Everything he built before the cave seems small and hollow and insufficient. Achievements that impressed people who measured success by the wrong standards. Accomplishments that served purposes too limited to justify the effort they required. Relationships that provided companionship without creating connection. The helicopter carries him across landscapes that stretch beyond the horizon, over terrain that holds secrets buried by time and covered by sand, past villages where people live, lives shaped by forces they cannot control, influenced by decisions made by others in distant places for reasons that have nothing to do with their individual needs or desires. The arc reactor glows in his chest like a promise, its blue light visible through his torn clothing, its steady pulse proof that death can be delayed through sufficient application of intelligence and determination, not just of life sustained by technology, but of life transformed by understanding, illuminated by recognition that some things matter more than survival, that some purposes justify risk, that some relationships create obligations that transcend individual preservation. Some crucibles break what they touch, reducing strength to fragments, transforming promise into disappointment, proving that not everyone can withstand the heat required to reshape metal into more useful forms. Others forge what they heat into something stronger, something better, something worthy of the sacrifices made for its creation. Tony Stark returns from Afghanistan carrying light in his chest and grief in his heart, and the absolute certainty that everything must change. Not just his personal choices, but his understanding of what those choices mean. Not just his business decisions, but his recognition of how those decisions affect people he will never meet. Not just his inventions, but his responsibility for what others do with what he creates. The man who entered that cave as a merchant of death will emerge as something else entirely. Iron Man is about to be born from trauma and genius and loss, and the steady conviction that heroes are not born extraordinary, but become extraordinary through the choices they make when everything they believe is tested by fire, when everything they value is threatened by forces beyond their control, when everything they thought they knew proves inadequate for circumstances they never imagined facing. Let your breathing slow now as the helicopter carries Tony Stark toward a future he cannot yet imagine, toward responsibilities he has not yet accepted, toward a transformation that will reshape not just his own life, but the world around him. Rest in this moment between ending and beginning, when one story concludes and another prepares to unfold, when death becomes the foundation for new life, when loss creates space for discovery that suffering alone makes possible. Home tastes different after captivity. Let yourself settle deeper into this moment with us now. Feel the weight leaving your shoulders, the tension releasing from muscles you didn't realize were tight. We are returning to Malibu, to glass and steel, and the familiar rhythms of a world that operates according to money and influence, rather than violence and desperation. Yet nothing is quite the same as it was before. Rest here while we explore how transformation feels when you're living through it, rather than simply witnessing it. Tony Stark stands in his Malibu workshop 3 days after his return from Afghanistan, surrounded by familiar machinery that feels strange beneath his hands, like instruments he once knew how to play, but whose purpose has shifted in ways he cannot yet articulate. The basement air carries the same sense it always has: metal shavings and electrical components, the ozone smell of serious engineering work. But breathing it feels different when your chest contains technology that shouldn't exist, when your heartbeat depends on fusion processes that mirror stars. The arc reactor in his chest casts blue light across surfaces that once reflected only ambition and profitable innovation. Now they reflect something else entirely: the memory of a friend's sacrifice, the weight of awakened conscience, the absolute certainty that everything must change, not because he wants it to, but because understanding has made ignorance impossible, because knowledge has created responsibilities that cannot be ignored or postponed or delegated to others. 3 days since the rescue. 3 days since James Rhodes pulled him from the desert sand and helped him into a helicopter that carried him back to a world that operated according to familiar rules: money and influence, contracts and stock prices, the comfortable abstractions of corporate strategy. 3 days of medical examinations and debriefings, of questions that probed what happened without understanding what it meant, of concern that focused on his physical condition while ignoring the transformation that had occurred in spaces between his bones. The workshop calls to him not as sanctuary now, but as headquarters, the place where impossible things take shape according to blueprints drawn in desperation and refined through necessity. The robotic arms, dumb E and U, move with their characteristic combination of mechanical precision and almost organic uncertainty, following commands with the patient loyalty he programmed into them years earlier, when companionship meant something different than it does now. They recognize him, these machines, their sensors detecting his presence and responding with the electronic equivalent of enthusiasm. But they also sense something different. Their programming sophisticated enough to register changes in his movement patterns, his voice tones, the particular rhythms that distinguish relaxed cooperation from focused determination. They adjust their responses accordingly, becoming more precise, more attentive, more ready to assist with work that their analysis suggests will be more demanding than their usual tasks. JARVIS processes news reports with mechanical efficiency, while Tony refines systems and recalibrates sensors and considers the broader implications of what he has become. The artificial intelligence that bears Edwin Jarvis's name speaks with the butler's programmed patience, offering assistance without judgment, providing information without commentary, maintaining the kind of steady presence that Tony has learned to value more highly than he once did. Sir, JARVIS says, his voice carrying through speakers positioned throughout the workshop, your physiological indicators suggest you have not slept more than 4 consecutive hours since your return. Might I suggest? No suggestions about rest. Tony interrupts, his hands never pausing in their work on the device that will become something unprecedented in human technology. Sleep is for people whose consciences allow them the luxury of unconsciousness. The press conference happens against everyone's advice, despite objections from people whose job involves protecting him from situations where his words might create problems that money and influence cannot solve. Phil Coulson from Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement, and Logistics Division, a name so cumbersome it demands an acronym, wants Tony to read from prepared remarks that reduce his experience to acceptable abstractions. A standard cover story designed by people who understand that truth serves power poorly when truth reveals uncomfortable realities about how power operates in the world. Terrorist attack, military rescue, gratitude for safe return, business as usual. The script sits before him on the podium like a lie waiting to be told. Words carefully chosen to convey information without creating understanding, to acknowledge events without exploring their implications. The press gathers in the conference room like predators scenting blood, their cameras and microphones positioned to capture whatever version of truth emerges from this carefully orchestrated performance. They expect the usual Tony Stark show: charm and deflection, wit and misdirection, the kind of polished presentation that turns uncomfortable questions into entertainment while avoiding actual answers. But caves change people in ways that cannot be hidden behind prepared statements. Death changes people in ways that scripts cannot address. Watching a friend die for your freedom changes everything about what you are willing to say when the world is listening, about what responsibilities you are prepared to accept, when acceptance means abandoning the comfortable distance between intention and consequence. The truth is, Tony begins, his voice carrying a weight that silences the room, crumpling the prepared statement with movements that speak of decisions made in real time rather than committee meetings. I am Iron Man. 5 words that reshape everything. No secret identity, no hidden life, no mask behind which to hide from the consequences of power. Just a man standing before cameras and confessing that the world has changed, that he has changed, that change itself has become inevitable, not through choice, but through understanding that makes previous ignorance impossible to maintain. The reporters erupt into motion, shouting questions, triggering camera flashes, creating the kind of controlled chaos that follows unexpected truth delivered in settings designed for expected lies. But Tony stands still at the center of this storm, the arc reactor glowing beneath his shirt, like a secret made visible, like transformation announced through technology that proves the impossible has become routine. The workshop receives him like a sanctuary when the chaos of public attention finally releases him to return to work that matters more than public relations, to creation that serves purposes beyond corporate strategy. The arc reactor glows beneath his skin like a secret made visible, its blue light painting shadows across workbenches where tomorrow's impossibilities wait to become today's realities. Days blur into each other as Tony builds the impossible, sleep becoming optional when purpose provides energy that rest cannot supply, when the memory of Yinsen's sacrifice creates urgency that deadline pressure cannot match. The Mark II armor takes shape with mathematical precision and artistic grace, each component an improvement on the desperate creation that carried him from captivity to freedom. Gold and silver plates locked together like mechanical poetry, their surfaces reflecting workshop lighting in patterns that speak of function, elevated to art, of engineering that transcends mere utility to become something beautiful in its efficiency. Systems integrate with elegant simplicity that proves good design transcends available resources, that innovation flourishes when necessity strips away everything except what actually matters. Power flows from his heart to the suit's systems like blood through artificial veins. The arc reactor, serving as more than just electromagnetic shielding, more than just power source, becoming the physical manifestation of the choice between life and death, between passive acceptance of circumstances and active determination to reshape those circumstances according to will rather than fate. The workshop settles into rhythms that blur the boundaries between day and night, between conscious work and unconscious exploration, between known possibilities and unknown potential. Tony loses himself in creation, not as escape from reality, but as engagement with reality at its most fundamental level, the application of intelligence to matter, the transformation of theoretical understanding into physical capability. Pepper finds him in the workshop at 3 a.m, sleep-deprived and running on determination and the peculiar energy that comes from work, aligned with purpose rather than profit, from innovation that serves moral imperative rather than market opportunity. She carries coffee and concern in equal measure, watching as he fine-tunes systems that exist at the bleeding edge of possible. Her presence in the workshop brings warmth that artificial lighting cannot provide, familiarity that grounds him in relationships that existed before Afghanistan, before caves, before transformation redefined what mattered and what didn't. She has been part of his life for years, has witnessed his genius applied to projects both brilliant and trivial, has seen him at his best and worst without ever suggesting that either version represented his complete identity. "You know," she says, settling into the chair beside his workbench, her voice carrying the particular tone that close friends use when they want to express concern without seeming critical. Most people come back from traumatic experiences and take up meditation or therapy. You built a flying suit of armor. Tony's hands never stop moving, calibrating sensors with the focused precision of someone who understands that details determine survival, that the difference between success and failure often comes down to tolerances measured in fractions that most people cannot perceive. The work requires attention that leaves no room for distraction, demands concentration that transforms conscious thought into unconscious competence. "Most people," he replies, his voice carrying the weight of someone who has learned that he is not most people, that his experiences have moved him into territory where normal responses prove inadequate, didn't spend 3 months in a cave with a car battery wired to their heart. The arc reactor in his chest glows steadier now, no longer connected to salvaged equipment and desperate improvisation, but to technology worthy of its potential. Mark II, miniaturized, efficient, clean, a fusion reactor small enough to power a heart, powerful enough to change the world, sophisticated enough to prove that genius applied with sufficient determination can create miracles that seem impossible right up until the moment they become inevitable. But the device represents more than technological achievement. It embodies choice, the decision to live rather than simply survive, to act rather than simply react, to accept responsibility for consequences rather than hiding behind the comfortable distance that wealth and position usually provide between action and result. "What happens next?" Pepper asks, though they both know the answer lives in the work consuming his attention, in the metal plates that lock together with mechanical precision, in the systems that will soon transform theoretical capability into practical application. Test flights happen at night, when the workshop lights cannot compete with stars, and the ocean below looks infinite beneath silver wings, when darkness provides cover for activities that daylight would make too visible to casual observation. The Mark II armor responds to Tony's thoughts with mechanical grace that feels almost supernatural, systems interfacing directly with his nervous system through the arc reactor's connection to his body. The first time he activates the suit's flight systems, Tony experiences something beyond anything his previous life prepared him to understand. Not just the physical sensation of leaving the ground, but the emotional impact of possessing capability that transcends human limitation, of being able to move through space according to will rather than circumstance, of having access to power that serves protection rather than destruction. Flying feels like remembering something he never learned, like coming home to a place he's never been, like discovering that his body was designed for activities it has never performed. The suit translates his intentions into motion with precision that makes conscious control unnecessary. He thinks about direction and altitude, and the armor responds as if those thoughts had become physical law. California spreads beneath him like a map of possibilities, its lights creating patterns that speak of human activity, organized according to purposes he can only guess from this altitude. Cities glow like artificial constellations, their illumination proof of civilization's determination to push back darkness through collective effort. Roads connect these bright spots like neural networks, carrying traffic that represents individual decisions, aggregated into social phenomena. The Pacific Ocean extends beyond the horizon, its surface reflecting starlight in patterns that shift with each wave, each movement creating new configurations of light that exist for moments before dissolving back into darkness. The water looks infinite from this height, a reminder that Earth contains mysteries that technology has not yet solved, territories that remain unexplored despite humanity's confidence in its ability to understand and control the natural world. But purpose demands more than the joy of flight, more than the satisfaction of proving that impossible things become possible when necessity meets determination. Reports reach him through news feeds and intelligence sources, information that proves his weapons continue to serve purposes he never intended, continue to cause harm he never wished to enable. Stark Industries' weapons in the hands of insurgents who use American technology to fight American interests. The Ten Rings, using his creations to terrorize villages where people like Yinsen once practiced medicine, once served communities that depended on their knowledge and skill, once believed that healing could triumph over violence if good people applied themselves with sufficient dedication to protecting life rather than ending it. Technology built for protection turned toward destruction. Profit twisted into pain. His father's legacy corrupted by those who see only the weapon, never the heart behind its creation, never the intention that guided its development, never the hope that it would serve justice rather than undermining it. Gulmira burns with fires fed by Stark Industries ammunition. Families flee from Stark Industries tanks. Children die from Stark Industries missiles, launched by men who profit from misery and chaos, who see conflict not as tragedy to be ended, but as opportunity to be exploited. Each report lands like shrapnel in Tony's conscience, each casualty a reminder of the distance between intention and impact, each death proof that good intentions mean nothing when they produce evil results. The Mark III armor emerges from this crucible of guilt and determination, its creation driven not by the satisfaction of technological achievement, but by the moral imperative to correct mistakes, to accept responsibility for consequences, to use power in service of protection rather than profit. Red and gold plates locked together with ceremonial precision that acknowledges the symbolic weight of what he is building, not just a suit of armor, but a statement about how power should be used. Weapon systems calibrate with deadly accuracy that proves engineering excellence while serving purposes that honor Yinsen's sacrifice, that justify the gift of continued life by using that life to protect others who face the same threats that once threatened him. Not built for conquest, but for intervention. Not designed for profit, but for protection. Not created to extend Stark Industries' reach, but to limit the damage it has already done. The work consumes him, not because he enjoys it, but because it demands everything he can give, requires skills he has spent decades developing, tests his ability to transform theoretical understanding into practical application under circumstances where failure means people die, where success means people live, who would otherwise become casualties in conflicts they never chose to join. Red paint goes on last, its application requiring precision that transforms functional metal into something that speaks of purpose beyond utility, of commitment beyond convenience. The color announces presence without requiring explanation, communicates intention without needing words, declares that the person wearing this armor serves protection rather than destruction. Gold accents highlight key systems, marking power sources and critical components with decorative elements that serve symbolic function as much as practical identification. The combination speaks of Iron Man's dual nature, powerful enough to be feared, beautiful enough to inspire hope, sophisticated enough to prove that violence can serve justice when applied with sufficient precision and proper intention. Testing happens in the workshop first, then in controlled environments where systems can be evaluated without exposing civilians to risks they did not choose to accept. Each component must perform perfectly under conditions that stress test both the materials and design, that prove reliability under circumstances where mechanical failure means human death, where system errors create consequences that cannot be undone through software updates or hardware replacements. Tony wears the armor like a second skin, its weight distributed across his body through engineering that transforms burden into capability, mass into momentum, restriction into enhancement. The suit amplifies his strength beyond human limitations, extends his reach beyond normal physical constraints, provides protection that allows him to enter situations where unarmored presence would guarantee death. But the armor represents more than technological superiority. It embodies responsibility, the acceptance of obligations that power creates, the recognition that capability demands application in service of purposes larger than personal benefit, the understanding that some problems cannot be solved through money and influence, only through direct intervention that risks everything for the possibility of protecting others. Afghanistan welcomes Iron Man with fire and chaos, and the terrible poetry of weapons turned against their creator's intent, with violence that speaks of conflict reduced to its most basic elements, those with power versus those without it, those who profit from chaos versus those who suffer from its consequences, those who create weapons versus those who become their targets. Tony descends from the sky like technological justice, red and gold against the desert brown, systems targeting with surgical precision that distinguishes between those who deserve protection and those who threaten it. Not here to conquer territory or impose ideology, but to correct imbalances created by his own previous choices, to accept personal responsibility for consequences that extend far beyond personal experience. The village fights back with Stark Industries' weapons until those weapons are neutralized by Stark Industries' innovation, until the tools of oppression become objects for recycling until the devices that enabled suffering become raw materials for their own destruction. Irony tastes like plasma discharge and spent ammunition, and the cries of families reunited when morning brings rescue instead of death, hope instead of despair, protection instead of abandonment. Ten-ring soldiers discover that possession of superior firepower means nothing when facing technology that operates beyond their understanding, that renders their advantages irrelevant, that proves David can defeat Goliath when David possesses sufficient intelligence to transform theoretical knowledge into practical application. Their weapons designed to kill unarmored humans prove inadequate against armor designed by someone who understands exactly how such weapons work, exactly how they fail, exactly how they can be defeated by systems engineered to overcome their specific capabilities. Flying home, Tony feels the weight of what he has begun, not just superheroics in the comic book sense, but acceptance of responsibility that wealth and position had previously allowed him to avoid. Not just power exercised for personal satisfaction, but obligation accepted for moral reasons that transcend individual benefit. Not just capability demonstrated through dramatic action, but commitment made to use that capability consistently rather than sporadically, systematically rather than impulsively. Every choice from here forward will echo in the lives of people he will never meet, in situations he cannot predict, in a future built from decisions made with imperfect information and perfect intentions. The arc reactor glows steadily in his chest, its light visible through the armor's faceplate, its power flowing through systems that can protect others only if the person controlling those systems chooses protection over personal safety, others' welfare over individual preservation. The workshop calls to him upon his return, not as sanctuary now, but as headquarters, the place where impossible things take shape, according to blueprints drawn in conscience and refined through experience, where theoretical understanding becomes practical application, where individual capability transforms into collective benefit through choices that matter more than comfort. JARRVIIS processes news reports with mechanical efficiency, monitoring global events for situations where Iron Man's intervention might serve justice, where technological superiority might protect people who could not protect themselves, where power can be applied to create rather than destroy, to heal rather than harm, to solve rather than complicate. Sir, the artificial intelligence reports. News feeds indicate 17 separate conflicts currently in progress where Stark Industries weapons are being used against civilian populations. Shall I prepare mission profiles for potential intervention? Tony pauses in his work, hands stilling on components that will become part of the next armor iteration, mind processing the implications of information that proves his transformation from weapons manufacturer to protector has only begun, that accepting responsibility for past choices means committing to future action regardless of personal cost or convenience. Yes, he says finally, his voice carrying the weight of someone who has learned that knowledge creates obligation, that capability demands application, that power exercised responsibly requires accepting risks that power exercised for profit can usually avoid. Prepare them all. But transformation creates enemies as surely as it creates hope, attracts opposition as inevitably as it inspires support. Obadiah Stane watches from the shadows with calculating eyes and hidden agendas. seeing in Tony's evolution not moral growth, but vulnerability to be exploited, not strength to be admired, but weakness to be leveraged for purposes that serve interests beyond Tony's understanding or approval. The boy he helped raise has become a man he no longer controls. The heir he guided, now guided by conscience instead of profit. The weapon he helped forge, now turned toward purposes that threaten everything they have built together through decades of careful cultivation of relationships and systematic accumulation of influence. Stain moves through Stark Industries corridors with the confidence of someone who understands that organizations operate according to rules that transcend individual preference, that corporate structures exist to serve institutional needs rather than personal conscience, that business relationships depend on predictable behavior rather than moral awakening that makes previous arrangements obsolete. His conversations with board members carry undertones that Tony remains too focused on technical work to detect, implications that suggest concern about leadership stability, questions about decision-making capacity, doubts about the wisdom of allowing someone recently traumatized by captivity to make choices that affect stockholder interests and employee welfare. But Tony remains unaware of the storm gathering in his own boardrooms and trust funds, and the dark spaces between friendship and betrayal, between loyalty and ambition, between shared history and conflicting objectives. The arc reactor glows steady in his chest, powering more than just his heart, illuminating more than just his path forward, but casting shadows that hide dangers he has not yet learned to recognize. Pepper places the original arc reactor, the crude device that kept him alive in an Afghan cave, in a small glass showcase that sits on the workshop's main workbench. The inscription reads, "Proof that Tony Stark has a heart." Below it, shrapnel fragments catch the light like dangerous stars, reminders of the moment everything changed, of the friend who died to give him a second chance, of the distance between who he was and who he is becoming. The display serves as more than decoration. It functions as a reminder of the price that transformation demands, of the sacrifice that awakening requires, of the friends who give their lives to purchase understanding that cannot be achieved through wealth or intelligence alone, only through experience that strips away everything except what actually matters. The workshop settles into quiet as the night deepens, its machines humming with patient purpose that mirrors the steady rhythm of Tony's new heartbeat. Plans take shape in the spaces between intention and action, between theoretical possibility and practical application, between individual capability and collective responsibility. The arc reactor's light casts blue shadows across workbenches, where tomorrow's impossibilities wait to become today's realities, where genius applies itself to problems that cannot be solved through money or influence, only through direct intervention that risks everything for the possibility of protecting people who cannot protect themselves. Tony Stark has returned from the dead, carrying light in his chest and purpose in his hands, and the absolute certainty that some things are worth fighting for, some people are worth protecting, some causes are worth serving regardless of personal cost. Iron Man has been born from trauma and genius and loss, and the steady conviction that heroes are not born extraordinary, but become extraordinary through the choices they make when everything they believe is tested by fire. The workshop exists now as more than workspace. It serves as laboratory where impossible things become possible, as sanctuary where purpose finds expression through technology, as headquarters where individual conscience transforms into collective action. Here, surrounded by the soft hum of fusion reactors and the patient movement of robotic arms, Tony Stark builds not just armor, but identity, not just weapons, but character, not just technology, but hope. The world has changed because he has changed, because understanding has made ignorance impossible, because knowledge has created responsibilities that wealth cannot purchase or status cannot avoid. And in the quiet hours before dawn, surrounded by machines that respond to intelligence rather than authority, transformation settles into routine. Not the end of the story, but its true beginning. The man who entered an Afghan cave as a merchant of death has emerged as something else entirely. Iron Man exists now not as fantasy, but as fact. Not as possibility, but as reality. Not as hope, but as proof that some crucibles forge what they heat rather than breaking it. That some transformations strengthen rather than weakening. That some deaths become the foundation for new life that serves purposes larger than individual preservation. Let your breathing match the rhythm of those patient machines now. Feel the weight leaving your body as you rest in this moment between ending and beginning, when one life concludes and another starts, when death becomes resurrection, when loss creates space for discovery. Tony Stark sleeps rarely these days, but when he does, he dreams of flight. The tower is quiet now, but Tony Stark cannot sleep. Listen to that silence. Feel its weight. In the months since New York, since the wormhole opened above Manhattan, and something vast and hungry looked back at him through infinite space, rest has become a stranger. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, that makes you notice the small sounds usually hidden beneath the city's constant hum. The soft whisper of climate control systems, the distant ping of elevator cables, the barely audible vibration of steel and glass holding steady against the wind. Tony lies beside Pepper in their bed on the 71st floor, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing, watching the arc reactor's blue glow paint soft shadows on the ceiling. That light, a miniature star burning in his chest, pulses in counterpoint to his heartbeat, never quite sinking, never quite settling. Outside, through the floor-to-ceiling windows that make him feel both protected and exposed, New York moves through its nightly rituals. Traffic lights cycling through their colors in perfect sequence. Late-shift workers heading home, their footsteps echoing off empty sidewalks. The eternal pulse of a world that keeps turning, keeps trusting that morning will come, keeps believing in the simple promise of another day. But behind his eyes, Tony sees other things. Close your eyes for a moment. Let your breathing slow. Picture the darkness behind your eyelids, that soft, comfortable dark that usually holds nothing but the gentle drift towards sleep. Now imagine that darkness has teeth. Imagine shapes moving in it, patient and terrible, waiting for their moment. That's where Tony Stark lives now, in the space between sleeping and waking, where nightmares and memory blur together until you can't tell which is real. The fleet waiting in the dark. Ships like floating cities, their hulls marked with symbols that suggest conquest rather than exploration. Weapons that could unmake worlds with the casual ease of a man turning off a light. And in the center of it all, something patient and terrible, gathering itself to strike. Not the chaotic evil of human conflict, but something colder, more purposeful, the kind of intelligence that looks at populated worlds and sees nothing but resources to be managed, problems to be solved, obstacles to be eliminated. He slips from the bed without waking Pepper and makes his way down to the workshop. Barefoot on polished concrete, the arc reactors glow, leading him through corridors that feel too large and too empty in the pre-dawn darkness. Here, in the familiar warmth of machinery and the gentle hum of computers, he finds a different kind of peace, or tries to. The suits stand in their cradles like sentinels, Mark 7, Mark 8, Mark 9, each one an improvement on the last, each one representing hours of sleepless innovation. Desperate attempts to build something strong enough to stand against what's coming. Each one still not enough. You know this feeling, perhaps. The need to build walls higher, to make the locks stronger, to convince yourself that preparation equals safety. The way anxiety masquerades as productivity. How the mind tricks itself into believing that if it just works hard enough, thinks far enough ahead, accounts for every variable, then maybe next time you'll be ready. Maybe next time you won't have to catch a nuclear missile with your bare hands and fly it into the void. Tony's walls happen to be made of repulsor technology and vibranium mesh, powered by miniature arc reactors and controlled by the most sophisticated AI system on Earth. But the impulse is achingly human. The same drive that makes a parent check the locks twice before bed, that makes a student study until their eyes burn, that makes anyone who's ever felt truly helpless swear never to be caught unprepared again. The Mark 10 takes shape slowly. Stealth capabilities this time, not just visual, but thermal, electromagnetic, every spectrum he can think of. Better power distribution that won't fail in vacuum conditions. Thrusters that can push him to Mach 5 in Earth's atmosphere, fast enough to intercept threats before they reach populated areas. He works through the night, and the next night, and the one after that. His hands move with practiced precision, muscle memory guiding wire and circuit, while his mind races ahead to the next improvement, the next innovation, the next layer of protection between Earth and the darkness beyond. JARVIS suggests sleep cycles, nutrition schedules, basic human maintenance protocols. The AI's voice carries a note of concern that Tony programmed, but never expected to hear directed at him. Sir, you have been active for 37 consecutive hours. Your cognitive function will begin to deteriorate without proper rest. Tony waves him off. I'll rest when it's finished. When what is finished, sir? The question hangs in the workshop air like smoke. When what is finished? When he's built enough suits to protect every populated center on Earth? When he's created weapons that can punch holes in reality itself? When he's made himself into something more than human, something capable of standing against forces that regard entire civilizations as minor inconveniences? There's too much to do. Always too much to do. Every hour spent sleeping is an hour not spent preparing, not spent building, not spent trying to make himself into something worthy of the responsibility that's fallen on his shoulders. The responsibility of being the one who went through that wormhole, the one who saw what's waiting in the dark, the one who came back with the knowledge that Earth's victory was temporary, a single good day in a war that's already begun. It's on a Thursday afternoon, sitting in a restaurant in the village, with sunlight streaming through windows that make the world seem safe and ordinary, that everything changes. The restaurant smells like garlic and basil, like bread baking and wine aging in wooden casks. Normal smells, human smells, the kind of rich, layered atmosphere that speaks to thousands of years of civilization, of people gathering to share food and stories and the simple pleasure of each other's company. Tony sits at a corner table, trying to enjoy a meal he can't quite taste, when a child approaches. The boy is maybe 8 years old, with bright eyes and the kind of fearless curiosity that only children possess. His mother follows a few steps behind, apologetic and proud in equal measure, clearly struggling with the eternal parent dilemma of encouraging their child's boldness while maintaining some semblance of public decorum. "Are you Iron Man?" the boy asks, with the directness that makes adults uncomfortable, but children honest. Tony looks up from his untouched pasta. The child's face is open, expectant, filled with the kind of wonder that makes heroism seem not just possible, but necessary. Depends who's asking. "I'm Jake," the boy says solemnly, as if this introduction carries the weight of formal diplomacy. "I saw the news about New York, about the aliens." The word aliens hits Tony like a physical blow. Suddenly, the restaurant's warm atmosphere feels thin and brittle, like a soap bubble ready to burst at the slightest touch. The sounds around him, conversation and laughter, the clink of silverware against plates, become distant and hollow, as if he's hearing them from underwater. "Were you scared?" Jake asks, and the question strips away every defense Tony has constructed since that day above Manhattan. The world suddenly becomes very small and very bright. The restaurant shrinks to a pinprick of light surrounded by vast darkness. Tony's chest tightens, a band of iron squeezing around his ribs until each breath becomes a conscious effort. His hands begin to shake, just slightly, but enough that he has to put down his coffee cup before it betrays him entirely. The child's mother is apologizing, pulling Jake away, but their voices sound distant and hollow, like they're speaking from the bottom of a well. "Were you scared?" Such a simple question, such an impossible answer. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that you've seen things that make childhood monsters look tame, that you've stared into infinite space and felt something looking back, something that makes human concepts of fear seem quaint and inadequate? Yes, he was scared. He's still scared, terrified in ways that go bone deep, that wake him at 3 a.m. with his heart racing and the taste of metal in his mouth. Scared not just for himself, but for every person on earth who sleeps peacefully in their beds, trusting that someone, somewhere, is standing guard against the dark. He makes some excuse and leaves, stands on the sidewalk in the middle of Manhattan, billionaire genius inventor Tony Stark, unable to catch his breath. Around him, people walk past with their ordinary troubles, their earthbound concerns, unaware that their protector is falling apart outside a diner because a child asked if he was scared. The panic attack, because that's what it is, though Tony won't admit it for weeks yet, feels like drowning in reverse. Instead of water filling his lungs, it's emptiness. The terrible certainty that the air around him contains nothing his body can use, that he's suffocating on perfectly normal oxygen while his heart hammers against his ribs like something caged and desperate to escape. A businessman in an expensive suit gives him a wide berth, checking his phone to avoid eye contact with whatever breakdown is happening on the corner of Bleecker and Sullivan. a woman with a baby stroller crosses to the other side of the street, protective instincts engaged by the sight of a man who looks like he might be dangerous to be around. They're not wrong. Tony Stark is dangerous. To himself, to anyone who gets too close, to the careful fiction that heroes are somehow more than human. He makes it back to the tower on autopilot, muscle memory guiding him through traffic and security checkpoints, while his conscious mind remains locked in that restaurant, trapped by an 8-year-old's innocent question and the weight of everything he can't explain. The attacks come more frequently after that, in board meetings where the gentle hum of air conditioning becomes the whistle of wind through a damaged helmet, at galas where the clink of champagne glasses transforms into the sound of alien metal scraping against his armor. Once, memorably, in the middle of a presentation to the Pentagon, where he finds himself gripping the podium so hard his knuckles go white, talking about defensive capabilities, while his vision tunnels to a bright point of panic. The irony isn't lost on him. Tony Stark, who built his first suit of armor in a cave with a box of scraps, who faced down terrorists and corporate saboteurs and living gods, brought low by his own nervous system. His body, apparently, has decided that crowded rooms and unexpected questions pose a greater threat than actual alien invasions. He makes it through on autopilot most times, charm and intellect carrying him when his physical form betrays him. The same qualities that made him a successful weapons manufacturer, that let him talk his way out of congressional hearings and hostile takeovers, now serve as armor against the growing cracks in his composure. He becomes a master of the strategic retreat, the graceful exit, the perfectly timed joke that deflects attention just long enough for him to escape to somewhere quiet and empty. But afterwards, sitting in his car in underground parking garages or locked in bathroom stalls at 5-star hotels, he waits for his hands to stop shaking and wonders when he became this fragile. When the man who flew a nuclear missile through an interdimensional portal became someone who can't handle dinner conversation with a curious child. Pepper finds him one night in the workshop, surrounded by the blueprints for Mark 20 through Mark 30, drinking coffee that's gone cold hours ago. She doesn't say anything at first, just stands in the doorway, watching him work with the particular stillness of someone who's been doing a lot of careful watching lately. The workshop smells like solder and machine oil, like heated metal, and the particular ozone scent that accompanies high-voltage electronics. Comfortable smells, productive smells, the olfactory signature of creation and innovation. But underneath it all is something else now. The stale aroma of too much caffeine and too little sleep. The slightly sharp tang of anxiety sweat and unwashed hair. "When did you last eat?" she asks finally, her voice carrying the forced casualness of someone trying not to spook a skittish animal. "I ate," Tony says, not looking up from the holographic display that shows the Mark 25's power distribution grid. There was something earlier. It's a lie, and they both know it. The something was half a protein bar grabbed between meetings, consumed without tasting, while his mind raced ahead to the next modification, the next improvement, the next layer of protection he could build between the world and whatever's coming. "Tony?" She steps closer, her bare feet silent on the workshop's polished concrete floor. When she reaches out to touch his shoulder, he flinches, just a little, just enough that she notices. The contact feels electric, too much sensation all at once, like his skin has been stripped raw, and every gentle touch becomes an assault on already overloaded nerves. You need to sleep. Can't. The word comes out sharper than he intended, edged with frustration that has nothing to do with her, and everything to do with his body's refusal to cooperate with his intentions. He forces a smile, tries to summon the easy charm that's carried him through everything else. Big presentation tomorrow. Defense Department wants to see the Mark 15 capabilities. You know how it is, but Pepper knows him too well for that. She's seen him work for days without rest before, seen him charm senators and generals while running on nothing but coffee and stubborn brilliance. She's watched him face down hostile board members and investigative journalists and actual supervillains with the same unshakable confidence. This is different. This has an edge of desperation to it, a frantic quality that makes her chest tight with worry. The suits in the workshop are talking to JARVIS, she says quietly, each word chosen with surgical precision. They're designed to respond to perceived threats. Last night, the Mark 12 activated on its own when you had a nightmare. Tony's hands still on the holographic interface. The Mark 25 schematics rotate slowly in the air between them. 30 tons of sophisticated weaponry and defensive systems that might as well be a child's drawing for all the protection it offers against the real threat. Did it hurt you? The question comes out small, almost lost in the workshop's ambient hum. This is what keeps him awake, what drives him to build suit after suit after suit. Not the abstract fear of alien invasion, but the specific terror that his attempts to protect the people he loves might become the very thing that destroys them. No, Pepper says, but her voice carries the weight of a near miss. But Tony, it scanned me. Its targeting system came online. For almost 30 seconds, it couldn't tell the difference between me and a threat. The words land like physical weight, settling on Tony's shoulders with the terrible gravity of unintended consequences. He turns off the hologram and sits down heavily in his chair, the exhaustion suddenly visible in every line of his body. The arc reactor's glow seems dimmer somehow, as if even his artificial heart is running on reserve power. I can fix that, he says automatically, mind already racing towards solutions. Better friend or foe protocols, maybe biometric locks that respond to DNA signatures, or a secondary authentication system that requires verbal confirmation before weapon systems engage. I could integrate it with the home security network, create a whitelist of authorized personnel. That's not the point. Then what is the point? Pepper kneels beside his chair, bringing herself to eye level with him. Up close, the signs of his deterioration are impossible to ignore. The hollows under his eyes, dark as bruises. The way his hands tremble slightly when he thinks she's not watching. The manic edge to his speech when he talks about his work, as if the words might escape if he doesn't capture them quickly enough. The point is that you're hurting, she says gently. And instead of talking about it, you're trying to build your way out of it. Again. The argument that follows is quiet and heartbreaking, conducted in the careful tones of two people who love each other enough to handle painful truths with surgical precision. Tony tries to explain what he saw up there in space, in that moment when the wormhole stretched open like a wound in reality itself. He describes the fleet that waited beyond, not dozens of ships, but thousands maybe millions, an armada so vast that Earth's entire military force would be less than an inconvenience to them. Something looked back at me, Pepper, he says, staring at his hands as if they might hold answers he can't find anywhere else. Through that portal, across space and time and dimensions I don't even have names for, and it saw me too, saw Earth, saw that we exist and where we are and how utterly unprepared we are for what's already on its way. He talks about the calculations that keep him awake, the mathematical certainty that Earth's victory over the Chitauri was a statistical anomaly, a single moment of successful defense against an enemy that has all of time and space to plan their next move. Every minute they waste sleeping or eating or pretending everything is normal is a minute they're not preparing for the real war, the one that's coming whether they're ready or not. Pepper listens without interrupting, watching him pace the workshop like a caged animal, recognizing the particular rhythm of his anxiety. The way he moves from workstation to workstation without really accomplishing anything, touching tools and components as if their physical presence might anchor him to the present moment. When he finally stops talking, the silence stretches between them like a bridge. Neither is sure they can cross. Outside, dawn touches the edges of the Manhattan skyline, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold that promise another ordinary day for the 8 million people who trust that someone, somewhere, is keeping them safe. I can't lose you, Tony says finally, the words torn out of him like shrapnel from a wound. I can't lose any of you. You have no idea what's coming, what we're up against. Every second I spend not working, not building, not preparing, that's a second closer to the day when it won't matter how much I love you, because there won't be anything left to love. Maybe not, Pepper says, and her voice carries a sadness that makes Tony's chest tight for reasons that have nothing to do with panic attacks. But I know what's happening right now, and right now I'm losing you anyway. She kisses his forehead, a benediction that tastes like salt, and promises he's not sure he can keep. Then she leaves him alone with his machines and his blueprints, and the terrible certainty that no amount of armor will ever be enough to protect the things that matter most. The days that follow blur together in a haze of welding sparks and solder fumes, of holographic displays that show increasingly sophisticated ways to kill things that might threaten Earth. The suits multiply like cells in a petri dish. Mark 35, designed for underwater combat. Mark 36, optimized for high-altitude interception. Mark 37, built specifically to function in the vacuum of space. Each one addressing a different threat profile, a different nightmare scenario pulled from Tony's increasingly fragmented sleep. The people of New York go about their lives below, unaware that their protector sits in a tower above them, building bulwarks against an enemy that exists primarily in the dark spaces behind his eyes. They complain about traffic and taxes, fall in love and out of love, worry about jobs and mortgages, and whether their children are getting enough vegetables in their diet. Normal human concerns, the kind of problems Tony used to think were beneath his notice. Now he envies them, envies their ability to sleep soundly, to wake up thinking about coffee and commutes instead of alien invasion fleets, and the terrible arithmetic of how many lives one man can save if he just builds enough, works long enough, pushes hard enough against the inevitable. It's a simple threat that breaks everything open. A man claiming to be the Mandarin, broadcasting grainy video messages that promise fire and destruction to America in general, and Tony Stark in particular. The kind of terrorist theater that should be routine by now, handled by appropriate authorities, while Tony focuses on larger cosmic threats. But Happy Hogan, loyal Happy, who's been by Tony's side since the beginning, who's caught bullets and taken beatings, and never asked for anything more than the privilege of protecting someone he believes in, catches shrapnel in a bombing meant to send Tony a message. Tony sits in a hospital waiting room that smells like disinfectant and fear, watching doctors in green scrubs speak to Happy's wife in the careful, measured tones they reserve for uncertain outcomes. Brain injuries, they explain. Swelling. Pressure that needs to be relieved if they can manage it without causing more damage. The words wash over Tony like ocean waves, each one eroding a little more of his carefully maintained composure. This is what he was afraid of. Not the abstract threat of alien invasion, but the specific, intimate consequence of being associated with Tony Stark. Happy didn't sign up for interdimensional war. He signed up to drive cars and open doors and make sure Tony showed up to meetings on time. The bombing that put him in intensive care wasn't even aimed at him. He was just close enough to Tony to become collateral damage in someone else's war. Tony does what Tony does when the world spirals beyond his control. He fights back, publicly, dramatically, stands outside the hospital and gives his address, his actual physical address, to every camera in sight. "My name is Tony Stark," he tells the assembled reporters, the words carrying a weight that feels almost liturgical in their formal simplicity. "I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of anyone. 1202 Malibu Point, 90265. I'll leave the door unlocked." It's not strategy, not the measured response of a tactical genius who spent years learning to think 3 moves ahead. It's the desperate lashing out of a man who needs something solid to hit, because everything he's really afraid of exists in the realm of dark possibilities and infinite space. The Mandarin is real, physical, human, something Tony can understand and fight, and maybe even defeat, unlike the vast patience that waits beyond the stars, unlike the anxiety that gnaws at him from within. This threat has a face and a name, and weaknesses he can exploit. The missiles come at night, as they always do in nightmares. Tony wakes to the sound of JARVIS announcing multiple incoming projectiles, his voice carrying the particular urgency reserved for imminent catastrophe. Through the bedroom's floor-to-ceiling windows, he can see them streaking across the star-filled sky like falling stars, beautiful and terrible in their precise trajectory toward everything he's built. The house, his beautiful, impossible house that hangs on the edge of a cliff like a monument to the power of human ingenuity, shudders under the first impact. Glass rains down like deadly snow. Steel beams groan under stresses they were never designed to handle. In the space of heartbeats, the sanctuary Tony created for himself and Pepper becomes a death trap. Every beautiful curve and impossible angle transformed into sharp edges and falling debris. He barely makes it to the Mark 42, the suit flowing around him in segments that respond more to desperation than proper command sequences. The armor's heads-up display flickers with damage warnings and system failures, even as it seals, 30 tons of sophisticated technology reduced to scrap metal by chunks of his own sealing. Pepper. Where is Pepper? The thought cuts through panic like a blade, sharp and clear and absolutely necessary. She was in the living room, reading by the fireplace, when the first missile hit. the living room that's now open to the Pacific Ocean, its floor tilted at an angle that makes Tony's inner ear scream in protest. He finds her in the wine cellar, protected by the house's reinforced lower levels and sheer blind luck. Gets her to the workshop, to the panic room he built but never thought he'd need, just as the final support beams give way and everything slides into the ocean with a sound like the world ending. The house, every memory it contained, every innovation born within its walls, every quiet moment of peace it sheltered, disappears beneath black water that swallows it without judgment or ceremony. Years of his life reduced to debris and air bubbles, sinking toward a seafloor that will keep its secrets until the end of time. He barely makes it into the Mark 42 before the suit's power fails, and they're falling through thin air above Tennessee, systems going dark one by one, like lights being turned off in a house whose occupants are leaving forever. The heads-up display flickers and dies. Flight stabilizers cut out. Even JARVIS's voice fades to static and silence, leaving Tony alone with a rush of freezing air and the terrible certainty that this is how it ends, not in glorious battle against cosmic threats, but in an uncontrolled descent toward anonymous farmland. The suit hits snow and skids to a stop in the middle of nowhere. Small-town Tennessee. Woods in winter silence, and a barn where a 10-year-old boy finds him dragging the broken armor through frost that crunches under his feet like broken glass. For the first time in months, Tony Stark is completely alone. No workshop filled with technological marvels. No JARVIS monitoring his vital signs and suggesting optimal strategies. No suits waiting in their cradles like loyal soldiers ready for deployment. Just a man with a hole in his chest and nowhere left to run, standing in snow that reflects moonlight like scattered diamonds. It should be terrifying. The absence of everything he's built his life around. The sudden lack of technological superiority that's defined his place in the world since Afghanistan. Instead, in the simple warmth of Harley Keener's garage, with tools that Howard Stark would have recognized, and problems that can be solved with spare parts and ingenuity, something begins to heal. Not quickly, not easily, but truly. The boy, Harley, whose name carries the weight of a dozen motorcycle brands and 1,000 American dreams, doesn't see Iron Man when he looks at Tony. He sees a man who's cold and hurt and trying to fix something with his bare hands. The garage smells like motor oil and sawdust, like old metal and new hope, like every makeshift laboratory where human innovation has ever been born. "You're not from around here, are you?" Harley asks, offering Tony a cup of hot chocolate that tastes like childhood and unconditional kindness. "What gave me away?" "The fancy watch, and the fact that you're bleeding in my garage." Simple observations delivered with the straightforward honesty that only children possess. No hidden agendas or political calculations, just a kid trying to help someone who clearly needs it. The hot chocolate burns Tony's tongue, grounds him in the immediate present, in a way that all his meditation apps and stress management protocols never could. In the days that follow, working with Harley to repair the Mark 42 and track down the Mandarin, Tony rediscovers something he'd forgotten in his rush to armor the world. The simple satisfaction of solving problems with his hands instead of his fears. The way creativity flows more freely when it's not driven by desperation, when there's time to think and experiment and even fail without the weight of planetary survival pressing down on every decision. The boy asks him about the anxiety, about what it's like to be Iron Man, about whether heroes get scared. All the time, Tony tells him, and for once, it doesn't feel like weakness. It feels like the truth. They work together in comfortable silence, two engineers separated by decades and united by the fundamental human impulse to build things that matter. Harley's questions are precise and practical, focused on how things work, rather than why Tony needs them to work. It's a relief to explain repulsors and power sources without having to justify the existential dread that drives their creation. My dad left, Harley says one evening as they calibrate the suit's targeting systems. Mom says he wasn't ready to be a father, but I think he just got scared. Of responsibility, maybe. Of screwing up something important. The words hit Tony like a physical blow, but not in the way panic attacks do. This is different. Recognition, rather than terror. The painful clarity that comes from seeing your own reflection in an unexpected mirror. How many people has he left behind? Not physically, but emotionally, in his rush to build walls high enough to keep the universe out. Fear doesn't make someone a bad person, Tony says carefully, but running from it does make you a person who's running. Are you running? Another impossibly direct question from a 10-year-old who doesn't understand that adults are supposed to have figured these things out by now. Tony considers lying, offering the kind of reassuring platitude that would make both of them more comfortable. Instead, he finds himself being honest. I think maybe I still am sometimes, but right now, sitting here with you, working on something that has a clear problem and a clear solution. Right now, I'm not running. Right now, I'm just here. Outside, snow falls on a quiet Tennessee night, muffling the sounds of a world that continues its ancient rhythms regardless of human anxiety. Inside the garage, two humans work together on technology that would have seemed like magic to previous generations. Their hands guided by the same curiosity and determination that built the first tools and tamed the first fires. It's in this garage, surrounded by familiar tools and unfamiliar peace, that Tony Stark begins to understand something fundamental about heroism. It's not about being unafraid. It's about being afraid and choosing to act anyway. Not because the fear isn't real. It's more real than almost anything else in his life right now. But because there are things worth being afraid for, worth protecting, even when protection seems impossible. The panic attacks don't disappear overnight. The hypervigilance and insomnia don't magically resolve themselves through the power of hot chocolate and automotive repair. But in the space between one breath and the next, in the simple act of setting down tools and trusting that the world will still be there in the morning, Tony learns something about rest that no amount of technology could teach him. Rest isn't the absence of vigilance. It's the practice of trust. Trust that others can carry the burden for a while. Trust that problems will still be there to solve tomorrow. Trust that the terrible thing you're afraid of isn't happening right now, in this moment, in this breath. The Mandarin turns out to be a fraud, of course. A shell game played by a man seeking revenge for slights, both real and imagined. But the lessons learned in that Tennessee garage about fear and courage, about the difference between being alone and being lonely, about the way healing happens in small moments rather than grand gestures. Those remain real long after the threat has passed. When it's over, when Pepper is safe and the real enemy is defeated, and the immediate crisis has passed. Tony makes a choice that surprises everyone, including himself. He initiates the clean slate protocol. Every suit he's built since New York, all 42 of them, representing hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of hours of desperate innovation, explodes in the sky above Malibu like the world's most expensive fireworks display. It's not surrender. It's not giving up the responsibility of being Iron Man. It's understanding that the armor was never the point, that the man inside the suit matters more than the technology that surrounds him, that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit that you don't have to carry the weight of the world alone. The surgery to remove the shrapnel from his chest happens on a Tuesday morning, conducted by a surgeon whose steady hands remind Tony of his own when he's building something important. The arc reactor, the thing that's kept him alive since Afghanistan, the miniature star that's burned in his chest like a beacon for years, is finally unnecessary. He throws it into the ocean from the deck of the temporary trailer, where he and Pepper are learning to live without walls made of glass and steel. It hits the water with a splash that seems impossibly small for something that's defined so much of his life. The blue glow disappears beneath the waves, joining the wreckage of his house in the dark depths where secrets go to rest. My armor was never a distraction or a hobby, he tells Pepper as they watch the arc reactor sink from sight. It was a cocoon, and now I'm a changed man. The words feel like prayer, like promise, like the kind of truth that only emerges after you've been broken apart and reassembled by hands that understand both engineering and healing. Tony Stark has learned to sleep again, has discovered that rest comes not from building higher walls, but from trusting that the walls you have are enough. For now, for today, for this moment when the only thing that matters is the warmth of someone you love beside you and the gentle rhythm of waves against the shore. Some battles are won not through superior firepower, but through the simple act of deciding that you're worth saving too. That the man behind the door, anxious and human and beautifully, terribly mortal, deserves the same protection you'd give to anyone else. In the quiet hours before dawn, when panic used to drive him to his workshop, Tony Stark lies still and listens to his heartbeat without mechanical assistance. The sound is quieter than the arc reactor's hum, more fragile, utterly irreplaceable. He sleeps, and for once, dreams of nothing at all. Morning will bring new challenges, because mornings always do. The universe remains vast and full of threats, both known and unimaginable. But tonight, in the space between one breath and the next, there is only the sound of the ocean and the woman he loves breathing beside him, and the understanding that this ordinary, human, completely unarmored moment is worth every sacrifice he's ever made. Rest comes slowly to those who've forgotten how to trust in anything beyond their own vigilance, but it comes in the gentle persistence of waves against the shore, in the steady rhythm of a heart that beats without technological assistance, in the revolutionary act of believing that tomorrow can be faced when it arrives, rather than feared into existence tonight. The man behind the door is learning to open it, learning to step outside without armor, to breathe air that hasn't been filtered through fear, to trust that the world is vast enough to hold both its terrors and its wonders without requiring him to choose between them. Tonight, there's only rest. And rest, it turns out, is the bravest thing he's ever done. The armor was never the point. It was always the heart underneath. A man who had everything and nothing, who learned slowly over many years that the most important thing he could ever build was not a suit or a tower or a wall around the world. It was a home. And that's where we'll leave things tonight. If you're still awake, thank you for listening. If you've already drifted off, sleep well. The Sanctum will be here when you return. If you enjoyed this story, a like or subscribe helps other people find their way here too. Good night.